Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. I'll get started in just a minute here. Checking the mic here. Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know how many people will join me. I'm gonna try to be doing these late night live streams every Monday. So if you're one of the people joining, um, please know that I'm gonna try to do this consistently every Monday night. If there's any audio issues or anything, please let me know. I promise this time to be watching the chat more than previously. So uh, here's what this video is going to be about. I've been doing a lot of videos about impeachment, about the Russia investigation, and what I consider corruption from the intel community, the deep state, the establishment, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like one of the things I'm constantly trying to, hey, what's up, Clearly Clever? One of the things I'm constantly trying to do is to find people to push back against me. I'm someone who was a debate coach. I debated in college. I love debate. Argument to me isn't something to shy away from. I really like it. I think it sharpens my positions. It also maybe I could convince other people. I like it just as a game, just as something to do that's fun, but also for intellectual honesty. And I really am seeking for people to push back. I think if you're just talking to people that agree with you all the time, it becomes very difficult to understand if your positions are actually good positions or if you have an echo chamber. Let me try to fix the audio real quick. Hopefully that helps the audio a little there. Thanks for that, Clever. So if you're watching in some retrospect, that's just how I wanted to start off explaining that. So I'm constantly seeking out people either that agree, but especially that disagree with me to be on my show or to do their show. Because I think it makes more interesting viewing. It's better for everyone, and it also helps me learn. The other thing is, I think that especially in today's political climate, it's important to show. One of the things that I try to do is show that you can disagree with someone and still defend your positions and yourself very strongly, but you don't have to be, you know, incredibly confrontational or impolite in doing so. I don't mind name calling, and certainly when I'm talking to my friends in real life, things get heated and we could yell back and forth to each other. But I honestly do try, with the exception of one debate I had in here, which just immediately started with ad homs, I try to be as respectful as possible. So in that vein, I had someone who watched one of my live streams on the impeachment suggest I reach out to certain people on the left that are streamers. One of these streamers is a person that goes by the name of Destiny. Now, Destiny's big on the platform Twitch. Twitch is sort of, and by the way, I'm sure that he would call me a boomer, as would any other people. I'm very much a novice when it comes to this sort of tech. But Twitch is just a recording platform that was designed for video gamers to play video games live, and then you can also talk and things like that. So that's where he got really big. He also has about over 200,000 YouTube followers. And I've known about some of his material for a while. He's considered by a lot on the left to be one of the best debaters that is frequently debating people that comes from a left-wing point of view. And so I thought this would be an interesting chance to kind of test out my positions on what I thought was going on with the impeachment, with the Russia collusion investigation, to someone who is considered one of the better people by hundreds of thousands of people on the left for debating and advocating these positions. So I just want to say what I think I'm going to do. I thought about today how I would do this video. I do think that I'm going to play half of our debate here. The first 40 minutes or so are about the impeachment and the Russia collusion. The second half of it breaks down into kind of him demanding, that's not fair, for him asking me to defend Trump and why I defend Trump. And I don't think that part of the debate's as good because there's not really a point to it. It's more at that point just a conversation of, I think, trying to back me in a hole where my criticisms of Trump somehow seem like a weakness. But, just to talk about that briefly, I don't think that's a weakness at all. I think that every one of us, I hope this is how I come off, and I hope the same for all of you. I hope that you think for yourself. Don't ever just like a politician and always defend what they do. Like a politician because you agree with their positions, but if they change their positions or they do things you don't like, then you should say, I don't like them. That's how I am with Trump. I criticize all sorts of things Trump does, but I still will vote for him unless something unimaginable happens, and I still support him. I think the pros outweigh the cons. And so I don't know, I just thought that we could get into that part of the debate later. But how did the debate go? I'm going to play the first half of it. There could be potential audio issues, so I'm counting on, especially you, Clearly Clever. Thank you already for giving me the audio issues. I'm still a novice at this, but I think I could do a good job of playing. Now, let me just preface this by saying that the debate did not have video because I didn't live stream it. I just recorded off my audio. And I was worried with my internet connection and camera and stuff. I was having trouble figuring out how to record myself while at the same time record the audio. So it's going to be just audio. So I'll leave me up here and just play the audio for you of this first half of the debate. So let me start with kind of some overarching thoughts. One of the criticisms I have with people that want Trump to be impeached is I feel that they are ignoring actual evidence and ignoring the big picture of what's going on. Instead, every time it seems that I'll present, or not just me, people like John Solomon or others, though if I can toot my own horn, I think that I do a pretty compelling case in unique ways that I don't see other people doing of defending why Trump did nothing wrong and there shouldn't be impeachment of him and why the Russia collusion hoax investigation was a terrible thing. But nonetheless, when you make these specific claims, oftentimes what you see the mainstream media, the Democrats, and then I think you'll see people like Destiny and others on the left, what they'll do is they lump everything you say together, say, that's a conspiracy theory, it's all been debunked, I don't want to talk about it. And I think that's a very poor form of debate, and I think it's not intellectually honest because, and I'm not saying it's intentional, they might truly believe that, but that's sort of an appeal to authority that doesn't, all you're doing then is saying, I trust that others have debunked it and I'm not going to look into it myself. I think that's what a lot of this debate became. Instead of being able to talk about specifics, it became, yeah, that's all just crazy conspiracy stuff I don't want to talk about. Which is ironic because the word conspiracy is thrown around as an insult, but technically the entire impeachment of Trump is a conspiracy theory, which is a theory that he sought to dig up dirt on a 2020 opponent. So there's an irony in, people claiming I won't listen to the conspiracy theories that then themselves push conspiracy theories. So the other thing I'll say before I start playing the audio of this debate is, regardless of what you think about Destiny, I know some people told me they thought he came off as rude. Possibly that could be, but I've debated worse people that were far ruder, so it didn't bother me. I can see that there's an arrogance and a condescension, but if I'm honest, maybe that's true of me as well at times. So it didn't really bother me, and I still had a fun time debating him. And even if you do feel like that, I do want to say, in his defense, I have roughly 500 YouTube subscribers. I'll have 4 or 5 people watching a live video at a time. He had 4,000 people on his channel watching me. He didn't need to platform me. And I do think that the idea of, someone like him being willing to just say, sure, I'll take a debate with basically anyone, that's a pretty cool thing. And I thought that he was nice to me throughout the process. He helped me on how to get through Discord and be able to communicate with him. So kudos to him for reaching out. Even if you don't like what he had to say, I do respect that he was willing to talk to me. I try to reach out to people on the left all the time and get almost no takers. So thumbs up to him for that. And also to his credit, he claims he's going to research stuff and have me back on his show to have a more in-depth conversation about impeachment and Russia collusion. But having said all that, my plan here is to play parts of the audio here from about the first 40 minutes of the debate, pausing it when I feel necessary to talk about what I think's going on. So again, it's just going to be audio. I think you can tell my whiny voice from his, so hopefully you won't have any question on who is who. So let's go ahead and get started and see how this goes.
Okay. So are you good to start now, or did you want to wait a minute?
Just let's go for it. Let's get right on into it. I've only got one camera today, so I can't really give you a camera. Is that okay?
Oh, that no problem at all. We don't want people distracted about how handsome I am anyway. So
Okay.
but
all right. Hit me up. What you got?
Yeah. So I just I did a live stream the other day. I had met several people that were big fans of yours, and I've been watching your content off and on for about a month, and they recommended I get in touch with you about I think they believe that you're for the impeachment of Trump based on the impeachment hearings.
That's a pretty hard one. I'm in favor of wherever things wind up. I mean, it kind of seems pretty bad right now for the Trumpster, but yeah, I mean, whatever happens, happens, I guess. I'm not like super hanging my hat on impeachment or anything.
So the first thing that I wanted to discuss is the lead up to this debate was I actually did communicate with him about the topic would be, and I thought this is basically verbatim what I said. I said, I'd like to talk about the impeachment because I think you're for it, and also the Russia investigation. But if you'd like to talk about anything else, I would be game. So a little disappointed right out of the gate to hear that it's like, well, I'm not really interested in this. And I kind of thought that this is how it would go, which is that he's smart enough to understand that he doesn't want to heavily invest in something and then say, well, oh man, this person knows more about the specifics than me on this. So it's easy to play it as, well, I don't think it's a big deal. But I think that it is a big deal, even if personally a person wouldn't think that, because it's clear that removing Trump from office and these never-ending investigations is the A1 strategy of the establishment Democrats and the media at this point. And so even if as a leftist you don't care about that much, it still seems that it would be important to discuss. It would be like saying, I support Trump, but I don't really care. I don't think it's worth talking about his immigration plan. Well, that's one of the key aspects of who he is as a president and what he ran on. And so I guess you could take that position, but it just seems if that's something that want to be discussed. So that was kind of my first clue. And I also wanted my goal in this was to show that I knew I was talking to an audience of 4,000 people or so that didn't like Trump and that were probably for his impeachment overwhelmingly. And so I wanted to show that you could make an impassioned defense of Trump here, but also make it in a way that says, look, I understand maybe you don't like Trump, but here is why it's important. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And I understand that as his guest on his program, that I kind of have to leave him steer the direction of the debate as far as what the topic will be. So a little disappointed already I was that it seemed clear to me that he wasn't as interested in the impeachment stuff as I was. But we'll continue.
Okay. Why do you think that I still haven't really got a clear answer for why the Democrats think Trump should be impeached? My understanding is it's not just a quid pro quo. It's that it has to be a quid pro quo with ill intent behind it for a personal gain or something like that. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think it has to be. There doesn't have to be personal intent at all. Congress has the power to appropriate funds for other countries. The president doesn't really have the power to mess with that. And it seems like Trump was trying to extract political favors from Ukraine in an effort, and then was holding that aid a hostage to them. It seems to be what all the testimony points to so far.
Well,
Okay, so right out of the gate, it becomes obvious to me, and I don't mind this, but this is clearly a tactic, at least to me it seems like, to try to win a debate as opposed to try to have an honest conversation, which is fine. Look, I was a competitive debater. I understand too. And don't get me wrong, I have arrogance and ego too. I want to come off looking like I won in any discussion we have where we're disagreeing with someone. So I get it, and I don't think it's unethical or immoral at all. But I'm trying to argue for getting to the truth of the matter. I also want to look good, don't get me wrong. I want to try to convince people of my positions, but I am trying first and foremost to get to the truth of things. And so when the conversation is starting off, well, no, I just think basically his argument summarizes this. I just don't think Trump has the executive power to be able to withhold congressionally approved aid. Therefore, that's what's impeachable. But that's clearly, if you've watched any of the impeachment saga, that's clearly not what the Democrats' argument is. And you can understand if you look a little into it why the Democrats can't make this argument. We know that that's exactly what the Obama administration did. That's admitted. That's what this whole hubbub's about. Trump wanted to investigate Biden because he admitted to the quid pro quo before. In fact, as I've said over and over again, the entire Democrat impeachment circus at this point is just trying to get us to the point where we already know we're at with Biden, which is, did Trump have a quid pro quo? We know that Biden and the Obama administration did. So if Destiny's right here, and no, the impeachment's just about, did Trump withhold congressionally approved aid, that's impeachable, then why didn't he speak up when Biden and Obama did this? And you'll see he constantly wants to say, well, this is just whataboutism on my point. And this is something the left says a lot, but it's not whataboutism, because the reason that it's considered, the Democrats are saying that it's bad for Trump to have a quid pro quo, is that it was to target his political opponent. But they've already conceded that quid pro quos themselves aren't illegitimate. Because again, Obama and Biden issued a quid pro quo. We know this. Right? That's being defended by the left. That's defended by the Biden's people, that's defended by Obama's people, that's defended by all the mainstream media, it's defended by all the Democrats, including those on the impeachment panel. So we know that they were okay with Biden's quid pro quo. They just say his quid pro quo was okay because it was to benefit the country by solving corruption. So I believe, as I've said in my live streams before, and this is what I wanted my debate with Destiny to be about, if there is a case for why we should investigate the three things Trump wanted, which was Burisma, the Biden's connection to it, and Ukrainian 2016 election interference, then there is no case to impeach Trump. That's what I wanted this debate to be about. And then I thought we would debate whether or not there should be a reasonable explanation for an investigation into those things. Instead, we're starting off on the foot of he believes that any time that a president would withhold congressional approved aid, that's cause for impeachment. And then if I bring up, well, why didn't you feel like that under Obama? He says that's whataboutism. But as I'll make the point later, that's clearly, we know from all of the Democrat talking points on the Russia investigation, you can't convict Trump of a crime while he's president. So we know impeachment's not just a black and white, did he commit a crime or not? It's political. It's a political calculus. So regardless of what Destiny's threshold is, we know that the Democrats can't use that because they can't sell that to the voters. It will be impossible for the Democrats to sell to the voters. We're impeaching Trump for the very thing that Biden and Obama publicly admitted to doing, which was threatening to withhold congressionally approved aid. The Democrats can't make that argument to people. The average person on the street's like, wait, what? You literally defended Obama doing this 3 years ago and Biden doing this 3 years ago, but now it's reason to impeach Trump? And the Republicans will rightfully say, see, this just proves the Democrats weren't serious. They're literally things that were done by the previous administration in a more blatant manner that they defended. They're now saying is impeachable. So it's clear that that's, even if that's Destiny's threshold, that's not the threshold of the Democrats. But we'll go a little further here, and I'll try to, you can see how I try to explain this.
I kind of disagree that that's the criteria for what should be impeachable, because it seems that in foreign policy, particularly with aid, we use quid pro quo all the time. In fact, that's exactly what Biden admitted to doing. He personally told them, we're going to withhold $1 billion in loan unless you fire this particular prosecutor. The reason it seems to me the Democrats are okay with that, they say, oh, but that was for the good of the country. So therefore that quid pro quo, even though it was congressionally approved aid, was okay.
So I don't know as much about the Biden stuff, and I don't really care about the whataboutisms that Trumpers like to pull when it comes to other types of politicians. It's entirely possible that Biden did bad stuff as well. I don't really know. I don't really care. I don't particularly like Biden. But it is not common practice for the president of the United States to hold aid that's already been approved over another country's head to extract information off of a political opponent, and then to request that said investigation be made public. Like, it's very clearly, and the fact that quid pro quo, whether it even happened or not, the idea that Trump attempted to do it is just bad in and of itself, and that offense alone is impeachable.
Okay, so here's something that's worth talking about. First, notice how it's going to be important for later in this debate. Notice how he says specifically here, right at the beginning, that the problem was it was a political opponent. He'll later say it doesn't matter if it was a political opponent. That's not what it's about. So just a quick catch there. The other thing is that's worth talking about at this point, I kind of explained a lot of what he was going to say there. This idea of whataboutism, this is something that's used a lot. People on the right do it as well, and I think that it's misunderstood what we're talking about. So I've tried to explain this to people before. The idea of whataboutism, that would be like saying this. Well, I don't care that Trump broke the law because Biden broke the law. That would be a whataboutism. So the idea would be, I am saying that I refuse to look at evidence or acknowledge or give a justification or anything like that on a possible crime being committed by person X because person Y already committed that crime. You understand? So the focus there is person X, deflecting from them to say person Y. But what isn't whataboutism is when we're focusing on a different group, and that group would be Group Z. So X would be Trump, Y would be Biden, but Group Z is where my focus is on. And that is the people that are running the show now, the people in the establishment, particularly the Democratic Party. So the whataboutism isn't, oh, I think it was okay for Trump to do this because Biden said. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the Democrats, those advocating for impeachment, thought that it was okay when Biden did this, so how can they say to impeach Trump when he did it? That's not whataboutism. Further, in this specific case, it's even less whataboutism because the very thing, as you heard Destiny say there, was it's about investigating political opponents. And again, that is the truth. That is what the Democrats are saying. Again, the Democrats have conceded this can't be just about a quid pro quo because they know their side publicly admitted to it. We have a public admission from Biden that he and the Obama administration gave 6 hours, threatened to withhold aid, only gave the country 6 hours to fire a prosecutor, or they were going to take the money and come home. Even though Congress approved that billion, that was a larger sum of money. That's a more blatant quid pro quo. Yet the Democrats and the media say that that was perfectly fine because it was to end corruption. Therefore, we know, and I've been saying this for months, the problem isn't the quid pro quo. The problem is, was the quid pro quo done for nefarious reasons? And that speaks to the intent of both Biden and the Obama administration. And if we could prove there was a quid pro quo under Trump, the intent of him. We have no one that spoke to the intent of Trump. And we don't have any idea what the intent of Biden was because there was never an investigation. I've argued the entire time that anytime we have a quid pro quo of an executive branch authority who's threatening to withhold congressional aid in order to fire a prosecutor that's looking into their son's company, there should be an investigation. That's the point I'm going to try to make in this debate, but I can't even get off the ground because he just says, no, that's all whataboutism. But it's not, because if we could prove that there was reason to investigate Burisma and the Bidens, then Trump did nothing wrong. And again, we'll get to later in this debate where you'll hear for yourself, where he makes the claim, oh, it's unprecedented to want to dig up dirt on your opponent from a current administration. That's not true at all. In fact, he and most of the Democrats celebrated exactly when Obama's DOJ and FBI were doing exactly that. Contact using a former British spy, Kremlin officials that were sources for that dossier, contacting Five Eyes allies, contacting people like Halper that was working with the UK intel apparatuses, contacting Alexander Downer, who was working for Australian intelligence apparatus. They had no problem with that. So it's funny to see how in 2 short months or 2 short years, and I said back then, I said with the beginnings of this Russia investigation, I told all my Democratic friends, listen, if Trump does anything remotely similar to this, you people will scream louder than I can imagine. Oh, no, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't. Now we just have Trump asking a Ukrainian president, hey, are you going to look into this possible corruption? And they're flipping out and saying you should be impeached. So it shows that, in my opinion, they were disingenuous from the first point. And yeah, Clever, you're right. I mean, he's going to admit constantly that I don't know the facts of Biden. It seems, to his credit, he does say he doesn't take a strong stance on impeachment, which I'll give him that. But you would think you would at least know the base level of what the Democrats are accusing and what the underlying story is behind it. I mean, even a base knowledge of this would show Trump's even saying in the transcript of his conversation with Zelensky, Biden bragged about getting this prosecutor fired. So you would think that you would at least have a cursory knowledge of that, saying, well, I haven't really looked into it. You know, maybe not the best position to be confident in making that admission. But we'll move on.
Well, I don't think it's whataboutism, and here's why. What Biden did, the fact that it's potentially being investigated, and it's not just Biden, by the way, this is somewhere the Republicans go wrong on. It's actually the Obama administration, because Biden admits in his speech.
So,
I'm sorry,
just to cut off this whole line. So let's say that Obama and Biden did bad stuff
Yeah.
and can be prosecuted for it. Could Trump still have done bad stuff as well?
No, because if Trump is using his position as the leader of the executive branch, which is to enforce laws, we have a long tradition in this country of the executive branch looking into things like corruption, including people from past administrations. For example,
Yeah, but we don't have a long tradition of the president. Well, firstly, when it comes to looking into corruption or whatever, the Department of Justice historically stands separate from the office of the presidency. It's not normal for the president to direct the Department of Justice. Those are two institutions that are supposed to stand separate of their own, aside from the fact that the president makes the appointee or appoints the head of the DOJ. But other than that, the institutions are supposed to stand separately, first of all. And secondly, it's still not within the purview of the president to hold foreign aid that's already been approved by Congress, which already has the power of the purse, to take that foreign aid that's been approved and to use that as leverage against a current political opponent is highly irregular. None of that is normal.
but
Okay, so just real quick to a second point there. I've already showed when people talk about this is unprecedented what Trump did, but the reason it's unprecedented is because what the Obama and Biden administration done was unprecedented. Can you name me one other, and I'll ask him this, but I'll get more specific with you, the audience here. Can you name me one other time in history that an executive branch has threatened to withhold congressional aid in order to fire a prosecutor looking into an executive branch's family's business? No, because it's never happened. Heck, even less than that. Can you name me one time the executive branch has withheld congressional aid to just fire one prosecutor? No. So it would stem that from that you would probably get unprecedented actions as a result of that initial unprecedented action. Again, it's telling to me that he and the other Democrats had no problem with the public admissions from Biden that this occurred. They had no problem with the media not covering it. They had no problem with Congress voting for this aid, but then it being threatened by the executive power. Nothing. They didn't speak up a word about it. So for now to them say, oh, this president needs to be removed for looking into that seems suspicious to me. Now, to his first point where he's saying that actually the DOJ operates separately from the executive administration, and he'll go on later to say things like Obama never directed things like Trump did. Now, remember what the transcript said. Trump's transcript didn't say that he was, I need you to investigate this or you'll not get the money. He didn't say that. He said specifically he wanted Zelensky's people to cooperate with the Attorney General, who's the head of the DOJ. Now, Destiny's claim, I'm assuming, inferring from what he's suggesting here, is that Obama would have never done something like that. Okay, then let's release the transcripts, right? Later, Destiny will make the tired old argument, oh, if Trump's innocent, then why won't he leave everyone testify? Well, how does Destiny or any of these Democrats know what Obama said in his phone calls? Only Trump's the one who's had the contents of his conversations leaked over and over again. And then Trump's the only president I know of that actually voluntarily released a transcript or an official summary, if you want to be technical, of one of his conversations with the foreign leader. So we have no idea what exactly Biden was saying to Poroshenko, what Biden was saying to other people in the Ukraine, what Obama was saying to the people in the Ukraine, what Yovanovitch, the ambassador at the time under the Obama State Department, was saying to people in the Ukraine. And we also don't have any clue what Obama or people in his DOJ or FBI were saying officially to other people, their counterparts in the Five Eyes Agreement, such as Italy, the United Kingdom, Australia, and other places, into their investigation of Donald Trump and whether or not he colluded with Russians in the 2016 election. In fact, it's funny because I would argue that many of the things that you'll hear Destiny say that, it's against precedent to do this and the Obama administration things were done differently, I actually think he almost has it inversely wrong. For example, we know that under Obama, the AG at the time, the head of the DOJ, who would have been why can't I think? His name's slipping me right now. Remember, he said that Eric Holder. He said that he was Obama's wingman. We saw that, President Obama issued executive order to get Holder out of contempt over things with the Fast and the Furious. We know that his AG personally met with Hillary Clinton's husband on a tarmac at the exact same time she was investigating Hillary Clinton. And it's widely known that all of these agencies under Obama were actually, even if it wasn't Obama directing them specifically, but they were all involved more politically and more partisan than almost any administration previously, the EPA, the IRS, and particularly the DOJ, the FBI. I mean, for God's sakes, we can see all of the heads of the intel community under Obama now have jobs at CNN, or they're regularly there, or other mainstream media outlets. They're vocal in their opposition of Trump and hating Trump. So the argument that, but it's a step too far for Trump to just mention to Zelensky that he would request aid to his attorney general in an investigation seems very misplaced to me. I just don't see where he's getting that. Okay, we'll move on.
It's because the reason that it's an irregular situation is because what was being investigated itself was an unprecedented situation. Can you name me one other time in the history of the United States that any executive branch official has withheld congressional aid to fire a prosecutor?
I can't, but again, that's whataboutism. Can you name me another time in presidential history where a president has asked another country to dig up dirt on current opponents?
Yeah, we saw that with Obama. We know for a fact that what Obama was doing was talking to people, particularly in the Five Eyes Agreement, all of our allies, about finding potential crimes that Trump committed, whether it be colluding with Russia or other things like that. And by the way,
so
Obama...
Firstly, hold on. Again, okay, so this is a really common problem with a lot of Republicans. These institutions don't function this way. The FBI doesn't function under the order of Obama. Obama does not order the FBI to talk to allies that we have. So, for instance, in our Five Eyes alliance, we don't. That doesn't work that way. Obama wasn't investigating Donald Trump The FBI had investigations related to Donald Trump. That's not an Obama investigation.
Right, but we know that we could even see through text.
Okay, so what I want to say here is his characterization of this isn't exactly true. I do think that there is some truth to the fact that, yes, you could have an FBI or DOJ operating independently, but it's beyond belief that they weren't operating at the behest of the interest of Obama. It's the same with the IRS. It seems that oftentimes this is the excuse given to Obama. Anytime that any agency under him that's in the executive branch, such as the EPA, the IRS, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, any of them, anytime they did something that was untoward, every single time the excuse is, oh, well, Obama didn't order it. That's, Obama, he wrote about it in the paper. He didn't know about it. Well, we know, as I'm going to say here, that through the text message of Strzok and Page, that Obama asked to be kept informed of the investigation into Trump. And we can also see that Obama's actions belie the idea that he wasn't okay with this investigation in somehow. Just because he may not have been the one that personally said, okay, start this investigation, doesn't mean that he didn't have the authority and ultimately the buck stops with him with the investigation occurring. And we don't know exactly what Obama was saying to other foreign leaders because Republicans never had the audacity to demand that transcripts of Obama's calls with foreign leaders be released. That was never done. That's unique to Trump. Obama's intel agencies weren't leaking the contents of his phone calls with foreign leaders like they do with Trump. And so the argument seems to be, the irony is, as you'll hear later in this debate, I'm coming from the position of distrust of the establishment and the intel community. Destiny's position seems to be, well, we need to trust those groups because they didn't speak out against Obama, so therefore he must not have done anything wrong. But that's exactly the criticism that I'm levying. And look, we know for a fact that Obama, for example, he lacks regulations to be able to allow all of the agencies to talk about the Trump-Russia collusion investigation more. We know that he talked to foreign allies about it and supposedly had told allies that they should be aware of the situation because Trump was under investigation for possible misdeeds with Russia. We know that there are reports of this happening. So it's not that I have to prove that Obama personally ordered this. Obama is the head of the DOJ, period. The DOJ is not going to investigate a candidate for president of the United States for the other party without the okay from Obama. It's that simple. And the fact that there's trying to skirt around that issue saying, no, that's not what occurred. Again, it's not as if Trump didn't get on the phone with Zelensky and say, there's a quid pro quo. You're not getting your money unless you dig up dirt, like Schiff said, make up dirt on my opponent Biden. That's not what happened. Trump said that his DOJ, Barr, was investigating these things, and he wanted Zelensky to cooperate with that investigation. Now, what's wrong with that? If Obama, and by the way, I would have had no problem if Obama said, hey, excuse me, Great Britain, Prime Minister May, or whoever it was at the time, or whoever an effective counterpart would be in their intel community. Excuse me, could you please, we have an investigation going, James Comey has an investigation going on into Russia interference meddling. Could you please, if you have any evidence that Trump or people connected to him were involved in any kind of crimes regarding this, could you please work with our DOJ to give them that evidence? I wouldn't have a problem with that. Now, as we'll talk about later when the IG report and stuff comes out, what I do have a problem with is using unverified dirt to spy on your political opponent through a FISA application. That's way different, though. So, R says if I rant about politics, I need a life. Yeah, probably true. So, anyways, we'll go on here.
Of Strzok and Page that we know that Obama was asked to be kept aware of this. And we also have, it's unprecedented that we've ever had a situation where personal phone calls have been leaked, not just leaked like with Trump, but actually had to have the transcript released. So we have no idea specifically what Obama was talking about to his counterparts in these countries. All we know is...
Wait.
Sure, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So much, keeping Obama informed is part of the job of some of our intelligence agencies. It doesn't mean he's directing them. Just because somebody's keeping you informed, it doesn't mean that they're giving you direction. Well, but the president should probably be aware of ongoing investigations like this. Absolutely. I mean, I think that would be a good idea, but...
Well, right, but you could say the same thing with what we see with the transcript with Trump's call. Trump didn't say, I'm personally directing. He said, I would like you to cooperate with my DOJ and Barr.
Trump literally personally requested that the investigation into Biden's son be made public by Ukraine. That was a literal request by Trump made that has been supported by multiple testimonies given so far. Obama has done nothing of the sort. You never saw anything where Obama was saying, in fact, Obama's even said that he was like, that he tried like very hard to keep that stuff separated. It's one of the reasons why Comey went public with the information that he did into like Hillary's emails. There's a lot of weird, like people trying not to say anything publicly. That was a huge trend in Obama's administration where people try not to come out publicly and say stuff. But in Trump's administration, everything is tried to make like be made public like very quickly. Like,
well,
So again, I think that's almost directly inverse of the truth. First off, Trump's been more transparent than Obama. That part's certainly true. But most of the leaks and the public information that came out is a result of people in the intel community and in Trump's cabinet trying to harm Trump. In other words, there's very few stories that have leaked out of the White House that were to benefit Trump. It's almost all universally to harm Trump. The idea that Obama was somehow this hush-hush guy that didn't want things getting out is also absurd. We went through how he made sure that he laxed the regulations to make sure as many agencies as possible got the evidence from the Trump-Russia collusion case. That predictably led to leaks from Obama's Obama's administration about the ongoing investigation of Trump. We know that all of the heads of the intel agencies at the time that Obama was president later came out to publicly speak out against Trump. We know one of them particularly, James Comey, was actually admonished by the IG and given a criminal referral for leaking classified information in order to harm Trump. And even when that criminal referral was refused by William Barr, the IG still said that there was a complete misuse of, or a complete ignoring of FBI policy and violation of FBI policy by Comey. So we can see over and over again that this was used to, the Obama administration was leaky and was selectively transparent in what they wanted to release to harm Trump. Now, the idea that Trump's administration's been more transparent, that's ironic because when you hear all these claims about the whistleblower, Trump's trying to get the whistleblower. Yes, it is true that Obama was notorious for prosecuting whistleblowers more than all presidents before him combined. That is true. He did do that. He was very tight when it came to leaks that harmed him. But when it came to spreading information to harm Donald Trump and his opponents, he was very lackadaisical about it. And I just think that it's a rewriting of history to suggest otherwise. All right, we'll continue.
2 points on that. One, that's just, I don't believe that characterization. In fact, we know that Obama laxed regulations like never before to ensure that different agencies under his administration before Trump took over were able to share all the information of the Trump-Russia collusion investigation, which predictably then led to record amount of leaks. For example, we know that Brennan was working for CNN, suggested to Comey that Comey actually briefed Trump on the P dossier, then used that hook of the P dossier for CNN to run the story the next day. So there was clearly unprecedented leaks, whether they were coming straight from Obama or not. The fact is, he was
there were unprecedented leaks. I don't know if we just call it unprecedented, sure, but there's a lot of leaky shit right now. There was a lot of leaky shit in Obama's administration. There's a lot of leaky shit in Trump's administration. Like when you get to the level of being a billionaire, you're going to be surrounded by a fuck ton of people, of course. And we've seen that Trump has severely compromised judgment when it comes to who he surrounds himself with. For instance, Giuliani or Cohen or Roger Stone, like all these people that are, catching charges and shit or just are fucking insane. So it's not really surprising to me that there are leaks, and I don't need a conspiracy theory to explain the fact that a lot of the people around Trump are quite leaky.
Yeah, but
see, again, it's kind of belittling what I'm saying with the idea that this is somehow a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. Like, I literally told him the IG, we know that the IG, for example, said that Comey leaked. That's public knowledge. Trying to brush that aside as a conspiracy theory is nonsense. We know that Brennan, through the notices, we know that Brennan was the one who told Comey to address with Trump the P dossier. We know through Comey's own words that he knew that CNN had this story and were considering running it, and they needed a hook. We know through their own admission that the hook was Comey briefed Trump. So in other words, Brennan set up the system to ensure that CNN had the hook, the company he was working for had the hook to run the story on the P dossier. These aren't conspiracy theories. But it's just ignored. And his claim, well, Trump surrounded himself with bad people, so no wonder there were leaks. But then the people he cites, like Manafort, Stone, like, sure, you could say that maybe they were bad people. It's debatable how bad and in what way. But they weren't leaking to harm Trump. Like, for example, the leaks of the phone calls with foreign leaders that were designed to embarrass Trump, the leaks of Trump saying "S-hole country," the leaks of all of this stuff coming out from the FBI designed to make Trump look bad that we saw for 2 years, that wasn't coming from Stone and Manafort. So to say, oh, well, these leaks are to be expected because Stone and Manafort are bad. No. It's not those type of people that are leaking. It's people that are ideologically against Trump that were leaking. So I'm not sure. He's just trying to conflate. It's one of these things that you see often with people that dislike Trump. They just say, oh, he's a bad guy, so that explains everything. And they don't look at the specifics. But really what he's saying there doesn't make sense to me. We'll move on.
It wasn't. The leaks almost universally are opposed to Trump. And most of them are for people at the tops of the intel agency. So, for example, we know that the IG report found that it recommended a criminal referral to Comey, but said beyond that he had broke FBI policy by leaking information, some of which was classified. Like, we know for a fact that happened. But again,
it's possible that other people made like mistakes. This is we're whataboutism to like a huge level. It's like it's possible the FBI made mistakes. A lot of people believe that Comey made mistakes when he went public with a lot of different things. When he talked publicly about the Hillary email stuff, a lot of people believe that was a mistake. But none of these mistakes exonerate Trump. The fact that people leak bad stuff about Trump doesn't excuse the bad stuff that's leaked. And I don't think you need a greater conspiracy to explain like all the leaky shit around Trump.
Okay, so notice there he talks about how, well, it's possible the FBI made mistakes. That's not a mistake. That's criminal action. That was action by Comey that led to a criminal referral, or at least a violation of FBI policies. It wasn't a whoopsie daisy. He didn't accidentally leave his memos out and then his lawyer got it and then gave it to people in the press. That was an intentional act. It wasn't a mistake. But he seeks to write it off as a mistake or a conspiracy theory when it's not. That's a serious deal. Can we name one other time in the history of this country where an FBI leader has been found to have a criminal referral and to have violated FBI policies in an attempt to smear a sitting president? I mean, maybe with Hoover, but I mean, this seems in my lifetime to be unprecedented. But it's all washed away as, it's just conspiracy theory. I don't need to listen to this conspiracy theory. And remember, why are we talking, as I'll get to here in a second, this is all off track from the idea of impeachment. The entire idea of this was just his claim that Obama would never do anything. The people under Obama wouldn't do anything like this. That's a sidebar. Ironically, he keeps accusing me of whataboutism, but that's basically exactly what he's doing. Oh, under the past administration, things were different. And then when I say, well, no, it wasn't different. There was actually some troubling things that occurred. He says, well, that was no big deal. So, it just seems ironic, the very things he's accusing Trump of doing when we show that actually that could have occurred very similarly under the Obama administration. All of a sudden, that's, again, not a big issue. But again, it's irrelevant to the overall case of impeachment, which I think is the point I'm about to make.
It's neither here nor there, I guess, for the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm making is that if there was a reason to, there's three things that Trump wanted an investigation of, or that what he talks specifically, that all the testimony says. By the way, there has been not one person that testified that Trump personally said that he wanted anything in exchange for aid. It's all, or in exchange for this congressional aid. It's all based on their presumption, they said. I could leave you
a lot of testimony, a lot of presumptions, a lot of people that have the understanding that Trump was threatening to withhold aid or wasn't going to exchange aid without that investigation not only being started but being publicly announced. That's what the testimony thus far has shown.
Taylor said that he heard through one of his aides who heard through one of Sondland aides that Trump told Sondland that in the phone. So then when we get to Sondland's testimony, Sondland says, I presume there was a quid pro quo, but when he's specifically asked by Schiff, he says, oh no, I asked Trump an open-ended question. He even said he probably used a four-letter word, but basically he said, I said, what do you want from Ukraine? And Trump said, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. I want Zelensky to do what he promised to do when he was elected.
Yeah, so, he said that explicitly after things were heating up and leaks had started about it. Of course. It's strange to me because you would never apply the same standard to somebody like Obama. Like, unless Trump literally is on a recording saying, like, I am requesting a formal quid pro quo from Ukraine. I want to, like, unless you have those exact words, it seems like nothing he says or does will prove that he's probably engaged in some pretty shitty behavior.
Okay, so to address this point specifically, and this is something that you hear people say over and over, Trump's actual words with Sondland weren't important. Now remember, if you go back to the Sondland testimony, the media was calling it game over. The nature of these testimony and the impeachment hearings were, Yeah, Schiff speak for about 15 minutes, then Nunez would speak 10 to 15 minutes. Then you had 45 to an hour of witness testimony. Then you have 45 minutes of the Democrats, Schiff and his counsel being able to question the witness. Then you go on like a 40-minute lunch break. During that lunch break, you've basically up until that point had 2 hours of Democrats talking to 10 minutes of Republicans. And so that gives the media the chance to spin the story before the Republicans even get a chance to rebut. That's exactly happened with Sondland's testimony. Sondland said there was a quid pro quo, end of story. But then under further examination, he says the quid pro quo was my presumption. Actually, Trump told me specifically on the phone. And Schiff goes, but didn't he specifically say on the phone? The reason that Schiff's asking that question is because he knows he needs more to sell this to the American people. Because the American people aren't going to take the idea that a bunch of career officials that were upset with Trump because they thought that the Ukraine should get this aid anyways, their personal feelings on what Trump thought were bad. Well, sorry, that's not impeachable for anything. He says we wouldn't give the benefit of the doubt to other people, but that's not true. The legal system certainly did. Remember, we had Hillary Clinton dead to rights that having a private SIR and deleting subpoenaed evidence and things like that occurred, but we couldn't prove intent because basically we needed her admission in her words, right? Isn't that what the Democrats told us? Now all of a sudden the standard changes for them. Now they say, well, it doesn't matter if Trump personally said it. We can just accept other people's feelings. Now, if Trump said what he said to Sondland, I want no quid pro quo, I want nothing. But then we also have reports that he told other people, yes, I do want a quid pro quo. Now I think Destiny's argument makes sense. But when we're only relying on hearsay and the only witness that personally spoke to Trump says, no, I don't want a quid pro quo, then his argument, well, of course he would say that holds less weight. And I don't know exactly when the timeline of when the whistleblower allegation was actually leaked to the White House or people connected to him. I'm not sure that was even leaked at the time that Trump made these claims. Now, no doubt there would have been evidence that Trump would have known that some people had problems with his potential call, but not to the extent that there was a whistleblower complaint. Why do we assume? Destiny says I'm erroneous for assuming that, oh, that must be Trump telling the truth. Well, why is he assuming that's Trump lying? He has no reason for that assumption. Again, we've had how many witnesses testified? Not one said that they ever heard Trump personally mention tying aid to these investigations. Not one. They all said that was their presumption. In fact, most of them didn't even say that. They said they heard from other people that was the case, like Sondland. And then when we talked to Sondland, he was like, no, when I talked to Trump specifically on the phone, he told me, no, that wasn't what he was asking for. So we'll move on.
I mean, like, just on a withdrawal, like pulling back on a broader frame, are you really comfortable that the president of the United States is making requests to other countries to publicly declare an investigation into a political opponent? It seems insane to me.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine with it. Just like I was perfectly fine with the Obama administration and all of the people under them, even if you don't think Obama was personally involved, making sure that the president-elect of our country, Donald Trump, was not a Russian asset.
Now, it's ironic, the argument that they're making here, because if you take this argument in a vacuum, I don't follow Destiny that much, but I do know he was, and I'll ask him, he was for the Russia investigation. So the arguments he's making here would seem to be damning indictments of the Obama administration, the Democrats, having an investigation into Trump, particularly when it was using opposition research paid for by Hillary Clinton's team as a reason to spy on people connected to Trump's campaign. But he seemed to show little interest of that sort of argumentation at the time. Instead, now he has a massive problem with a sitting president using his power to possibly investigate an opponent. Had no problem under Obama doing it. When we now know that at least one person in the FBI, it's being alleged, actually altered documents to spy on someone connected to the Trump campaign. We know that unverified opposition research sourced from Kremlin officials was used to spy on people connected to Trump's campaign. We know that the FBI used human intelligence sources like Stephen Halper and a woman who was going by the name of Azra Turk to spy on the Trump campaign. Yeah, I don't remember Destiny or any of these Democrats that are now expressing this outrage of Trump merely asking a president to the Ukraine to investigate corruption from the previous administration. All of a sudden, that's the end of the world. I guess if Trump would have just, I should have asked Destiny this. So let's say instead of Trump asking Zelensky this, instead Trump would have paid a former British spy to go to the Ukraine, talk to Ukrainian officials who would then say that Biden did untoward things, as did Hillary's team in the 2016 election. There was peeing on bed and things of that from Biden. Then use that to get FISA warrants to people connected to Biden and that are running his campaign. That would have been okay, I guess. but just blatantly asking, hey, if you have any information of wrongdoing, can you work with my Department of Justice and Barr? That's somehow beyond the pale? I mean, and he says, well, nothing like that. What Trump did was unprecedented. Nothing like this has ever happened before. We could see any objective person would have to say that the treatment that Trump got was during the previous administration. Remember, the investigation, we're told, started in July of 2016 under who? Who was president? Obama. Trump's treatment was far worse than anything that's been done to Biden. Yet they had no problem with it. So I just think that this is disingenuous. Clearly clever, yes. Sondland said that he got the impression from Giuliani that for a White House visit, a quid pro quo was necessary. He then said he presumed that the quid pro quo for the aid was also the case. That was his presumption. But when he specifically asked Trump about it, Trump said, no, that's not the case. So, moving on here.
Okay,
Firstly,
with that as well.
Okay, so two things. One, Obama doesn't direct the FBI. Okay, these institutions stand separately. Two, fuck Obama. I don't like Obama. I don't care about Obama. I'm not here to defend Obama. Obama could have fucked up too. That doesn't exonerate Trump. The pivots to Obama doesn't help Trump look any better.
Okay, take Obama or the FBI or anyone out of it. Did you personally think there was enough evidence to warrant investigation into Trump and his team as to whether or not they colluded with Russia?
It seemed to be the case, yeah.
Okay, but no one said, well, wait, it's unfair for the Democrats to be spearheading that investigation because it's their political opponent. We were told the implication is so severe, we could possibly have a president that's under the thumb of one of our enemies, that we need an investigation, right?
Do you recall any other massive investigations going on at the same time about a potential political person?
So this is a deflection. He doesn't answer the question. I mean, he's admitted, yes, I was for the Russia investigation. So the lead up to that was he said, oh, so you're okay with the sitting administration investigating a potential opponent? I said, yeah, isn't that what happened under Trump? I'm okay with that in theory. I'm not okay with spying on them using unverified information. But sure, I had no problem if there's credible evidence to look into possible crimes Trump or his administration or his team committed with election fraud or stealing the election or something like that. Sure. Obama should be allowed to investigate that, or his DOJ or whatever, right? But no one spoke up again. Again, people will try to use this later to say, oh, so Rob was okay with the FBI Comey investigation into Trump. No, I wasn't. But that's because it used unverified information to spy on people connected to his campaign. We'll later find out, I think that Joseph Mifsud was probably Western intelligence, things like that. I'm not going to get into it here. But Destiny concedes, yes, I was okay with that investigation. Okay, well, that disproves his point. Now he's going to deflect it. Well, what about the investigation into Hillary? Again, remember, he'll repeatedly accuse me of whataboutism. And I guess now's a good time to talk about, I wasn't following it during our debate because I was having a good time. But on his channel, I went back and rewatched. And so there's 4,000 users that were watching this. Of course, they're going to take Destiny's side. They're his fans, which I don't begrudge Destiny that, of course. He has every right. I would expect that to be the case. But they constantly accused me of exactly what he was doing, such as whataboutism or deflections or pivoting. Remember, this was supposed to be a debate about impeachment. And now we're talking about investigation into Hillary Clinton, and I'm being accused of whataboutism. So I just think that, there's a little revisionist, looking at this with rose-colored glasses, I think, from some people. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'll leave it for you to decide. The video's up there, so you can decide for yourself. But moving on.
Like Hillary?
Yes. Like, that probably cost her the election. Trump's stuff was pretty secretive until I think it was after he was elected, we started to find out way more information related to the FISA warrants and everything. If you want to complain about an unfair investigation swaying the last election, you should be looking at the Hillary email thing, not anything related to Trump, which there was way more evidence for than anything related to Hillary's email that got dragged out for years.
Well, again, that's neither here nor there than just the general point. We could say that it is okay at points for people to want investigations into their political
Sure, but
opponents.
the general point was, and maybe my timelines are fucked, I don't recall there being public statements about Trump being under investigation while he was running for president.
There were. Harry Reid, for example, I think 4 days before the election, wrote a letter to the Senate. Then he also released. Mother Jones also did an article about the dossier. So there was stuff out there. Also, if you want to get technical about it, Comey's admitted that the only reason he reopened the investigation was two things. One, there was a whistleblower within the FBI that knew that Strzok had been sitting on Weiner's laptop for over a month, which That's kind of a funny phrase, sitting on Wiener's laptop. But anyways, the second point is Comey admitted the reason he did this was he assumed that Hillary had the election in the bag, and he didn't want this to be an albatross over her neck for her first 3 or 4 months when people found out, oh, the FBI sat on this laptop until after the election.
So I don't know if that's true, if that's something that he wrote in his book. Regardless of whether or not that's true, that's still super far removed from anything we're talking about.
I agree.
The idea that well, okay, but you brought it up. The idea that investigations hurt like Trump more than Hillary is asinine. The investigations most likely would have been like the tipping point that cost Hillary her election. The emails were in the news constantly for a year. We didn't start to hear about the FISA stuff, about all the stuff related to Manafort and Carter Page and all these other people. We didn't start to hear about this until after Trump already won the election. So the idea that these investigations are causing somebody not to get elected, I mean, if you want to take that stance, sure we can, but then you'd be defending Hillary, not Trump.
Well, I didn't.
Right, and I'll bring up here in a minute. I'm not the one who said that. I didn't bring up Hillary. He did. And again, you're right, clearly clever. I'm bringing up. He said that it's unprecedented for Trump to do something like this, and I'm merely pointing out, no, that's not true. This occurred under the Obama administration. And then he says, what about Hillary? And I'm like, yeah, I guess Hillary was investigated too. And he's like, aha, that proves it was worse for Hillary. Well, that wasn't my contention. I never made those claims. See, constantly what's occurring, and it's not just with Destiny, though it's certainly occurring in this debate, but constantly what's occurring with people defending the impeachment of Trump and kind of this sort of corruption in the investigations into Trump, what happens is they'll constantly say that it's unprecedented or what he did was terrible. But then as soon as you bring up, well, no, that's not the case. We could look at just the previous administration to see that's not the case. They'll then say, oh, that's whataboutism. We don't care what the previous administration did. Okay, well, then stop saying it's unprecedented. When you say unprecedented, your implication is we care what previous administrations did, and this is different, thus it's a big deal. Me then saying, no, it's not different, or things like this occurred except worse previously, you don't then get to say, oh, well, this is whataboutism. You brought up the previous administrations by saying it was unprecedented. So, again, you saw, he was the one, he said, have you heard of another investigation in someone? I said, what, Hillary? Yes. So if you want to talk about the investigations harming someone more than others, I never said any of that. I didn't bring up Hillary. But again, if you watched his stream of this, his audience is agreeing with him, just saying, this is whataboutism. That's whataboutism. He brought up Hillary. What's that have anything to do with it? No, I didn't. That's what he did. But anyways, we'll move on.
I didn't make the point about Hillary at all, and I didn't say that the investigations hurt Trump more than Hillary. I'm merely making the point here that we expect our executive branch at times, it's okay. I don't mean it had to come directly from Obama or Hillary or Trump or Bill Clinton, whoever the executive is, but we expect that sometimes it's okay for them to investigate crimes if there's a reasonable suspicion that there's crimes.
We're not
just because it was their opponent.
But the precedent that's set is for the DOJ is that typically they're very cautious. This is something Comey's publicly talked about as well. They're typically, this is one of the reasons why Comey got so much heat. The DOJ is typically very cautious about publicly declaring anything related to investigations close to election time because they want to protect the integrity of our electoral process. The FBI doesn't typically want to come out and say things like, by the way, we're investigating this candidate running for president, because it's not the FBI's job to determine who's voted for by the American people. This is one of the things that's talked about pretty publicly quite a bit. Comey's brought this up a lot. That stands in stark contrast to Trump saying, hey, Ukraine, can you guys publicly announce that you started an investigation on Biden's side? He didn't even wait for any results or for any investigation to happen. He just wanted a public announcement that the investigation was even begun, which shows pretty clearly.
Now, I sped up the speed a little because it's taking a while to get through this, so hopefully you can keep up with it. But yeah, well, first off, the idea, I think I'll say this part, which is we have no evidence that Trump said that he wanted a public announcement of aid or a public announcement of the investigation before aid was given. That's just not, we don't have evidence of that. Secondly, even if that is the case, I don't have a problem with that. And this was explained by some of the witnesses that said the reason that you would want a public announcement of an investigation is because historically the Ukraine has been corrupt and privately said, yes, we will do things to end corruption. But then they didn't do anything. And so a public admission from the new president of, yes, we will investigate corruption would kind of hold his feet to the fire and force that to occur. That doesn't mean that Trump was uninterested. The idea seems to be, because it needed to be an announcement, that proves that it's nefarious. Then our FBI publicly announcing investigations into people around election time. Now, remember, we had no problems with leaks that were coming from the FBI that affected the 2018 election or that affected the administration and the agenda of the Trump administration, the leaks coming from the investigation into him. They had no problem with Obama telling allies after Trump was nominated that Trump might be compromised. They had no problem with all of the leaks, such as the Mother Jones, Harry Reid leaks right before the election. They had no problem with, in fact, things like Ukrainian election interference before the election. So all of that stuff they were okay with. And look, it's not just about once more, you'll see Destiny go back and forth. He keeps saying, oh, it's just about the process. That's what the impeachment's about. But then he's constantly going to keep alluding to smearing his opponent with dirt, trying to get dirt on his opponent. At one point, he'll even say, oh, but when all the dirt with Trump started to be leaked, it was after he was elected. So that proves that it was okay. And I'll say, but wait, we're a year out from the election that Biden, we don't even know if he's the candidate for. And he says, oh, who cares? But you can't have it both ways. And let's not forget, this has affected Trump's agenda, and it's certainly affected the 2018 elections. One of the big stories was this albatross hanging over Trump of these investigations. That's clearly what's going on with this impeachment investigation. It's being selective leaks, it's being broadcast publicly, all to influence the public in the lead up of the 2020 election. Destiny would never say, I don't think there should be impeachment hearings because it could unduly affect the 2020 election. So I don't understand what this claim is. Again, my original thesis is if there is a reason to investigate the Bidens, then there would be no case to impeach Trump. The idea of, but that should happen secretively. It's now illegal for Trump to publicly remember. The only public admission of this was through the Democrats forcing the release of the transcript. That's where all the public information comes from. If, as we're told by these witnesses, that in order for a meeting to happen, not the aid, but a meeting to happen, that Trump wanted Zelensky to go on CNN and say, yes, we're investigating corruption into Burisma, CrowdStrike, possibly the Bidens. Again, they didn't think it was the Bidens. That's what Taylor said. He didn't think it had anything to do with the Bidens. But even if that part of it's true, I don't understand how that still amounts to corruption. Again, we actually had the head of the FBI who was privately telling Trump he wasn't under investigation, secretly keeping notes with other people with the heads of the FBI in order to potentially investigate Trump or incriminate Trump. We then know when he was fired under the recommendation of Rod Rosenstein, he leaked classified information to the press to ensure a special counsel would be publicly appointed to publicly investigate Trump. All of that occurred. Not one person said, how dare this happen? The Mueller thing should have all been kept under wraps. They all demanded transparency. They all demanded that it be out in the open. In fact, Barr could have taken Mueller's recommendation in his report and said the public's not going to see this. But he didn't do it. He made it public. So the idea that somehow that this was going to be a public admission of investigation of corruption, and we have no idea. Maybe if this is true, what happened, maybe Trump just wanted Zelensky to say, yes, we will be investigating Burisma and possible corruption that went in involving the prosecutor and things like that previously. That's fine. That doesn't mention the Bidens at all. So this is just more stretching. I don't understand how this would be grounds for impeachment of Trump.
That he's not really concerned about getting to the bottom of anything. He just wants to hurt a political opponent.
No, I disagree. But as is one, we still have no evidence that Trump specifically said that. But even if we assume
tons, we have so much testimony right now that shows that Trump from so many. What do you mean? Okay.
No, honestly, I'm asking because we've had people say we presume this is what Trump wanted, but their number one witness, Sondland, says, I specifically talked to Trump, he didn't say that. Now, you'll say, well, of course, Trump was lying, but even if we grant that, like, for example, with Hillary's investigation, the reason she was left off was because we couldn't prove intent. Why would that standard be any different here? We can't just say, well, a bunch of people presumed what Trump felt in his heart. By the way, that's the same thing they say about Biden. They presume that Biden's...
You don't need intent. You don't need to prove intent when it comes to things like extortion or quid pro quos. That's not the intent is part of...
Okay, I'll get to his argument here in a second. I'll leave more play. But the idea that he says we have tons of evidence, again, it's just nonsense. We don't have tons of evidence. We have tons of hearsay. I don't care if you have 50 people that assume what's in Trump's heart. That doesn't mean that they have any insight into that they know for sure. We just have no proof of it. And again, I feel that Destiny, you can see, and maybe you won't be able to hear this, but after I shut the recording off, his channel went on and he admits to needing to research this more and possibly having me back, which is very kind of him, to talk more about it. But it seems obvious he didn't follow the impeachment hearings like I did. And I think a lot of people just hear the media talking points and they say, oh, everyone said Trump's guilty of this. But when you watch it, they're all saying, I mean, watch the Jim Jordan clip where he's talking to Ambassador Taylor. And he says, so basically your argument is, one of your aides claims they heard one of Sondland's aides tell Yermak that Sondland said that he heard Trump say to Giuliani that he wanted a quid pro quo for the aid or for the or for the meetup. And Taylor's like, yeah, I mean, that's six-hand knowledge. That's their big claim. I mean, it just makes no sense. Even Sondland, then, then let's go. So Taylor heard through 5 people that Sondland said X. So we go to Sondland. Sondland says, well, I was just presuming. That's not evidence. That's just his feelings. That could be wrong. And that presumption was ultimately wrong. The aid was released without a quid pro quo. Now you could say, well, that's because Trump was caught. Trump was caught. Nonetheless, the aid was released, was it not? So his presumption ended up being incorrect. So I just think that, you can see how, emphatic he got. Oh, we have tons of evidence. From who? And again, notice he ignores the point. He defends, and you could hear him when he's talking about the investigation into Hillary being wrong. Hillary got away with it because they said we couldn't prove her intent. Yet his standard is the exact opposite here with Trump. And notice that he just ignores that. He says, well, it's enough to have people speak to her intent. Well, if that's the case, I can speak to Hillary Clinton's intent. Does that mean she's guilty? All right, let's go on with what he's saying.
The crime.
But you need to prove that that's what he intended to do.
No, you don't.
Well, why wouldn't
If
you?
I go up to you and I say you need to pay me like $1,000 or I'm going to kill you, that's the crime is done in and of itself.
If you
don't have
say
to
that,
prove
but if you just say, hey, I'd like Rob to give me $1,000, and then people say, I presume that meant he threatened to kill him unless he gave $1,000, that would be unfair to you.
That's
just
not
people
what Trump's done. Trump made a request, and then he was holding the aid hostage in exchange for that request of an investigation.
But
So do you notice the switch up there? He gives his example, and his example proves that he's wrong. His example is, look, we don't have to prove the intent. If I come up to you and say, I'll kill you unless you give me $1,000, that's extortion. And I say, yeah, but that's not what Trump said. Trump said, can I have $1,000? And then people were saying, we presume that he threatened him. That's why the intent portion of it, we need to know. It's not illegal. It's not terrible. In fact, it's actually preferable when we're engaged in foreign diplomacy, particularly when we're giving aid, to ask for things. The question is, what is the intent behind it? And to even have an idea of if something was a quid pro quo, we need to have an idea of intent. Now, again, we have a public admission by Joe Biden. Yes, this was a quid pro quo under the Obama administration. Destiny and the left don't care at all about that. They didn't care about it at the time. They don't care that the same Democrats that are now saying it's impeachable for Trump to do that had no problem with it at the time. That's a public admission. But they're perfectly fine with the presumption saying, we don't need to know exactly what Trump's intent. We don't need to know. All we need to know is he withheld aid. So he kind of switches to that position saying, well, we know he withheld aid and we know that he asked for this request. Therefore, it must mean that it was a quid pro quo. But that's not what that means at all. He asked for a request on the phone and he was withholding aid separate of that. We know that Zelensky offered to give what Trump was asking for without even knowing that the aid was on hold. Therefore, by definition, it couldn't have been a quid pro quo. At least on the phone call, that was originally what the whistleblower claimed. So we'll go further here to see what he has to say.
don't have proof of that. We don't have proof and there's clearly the only reason that we would need. Let me put it this way: the only way we could assume that would be if there's not other plausible explanations. And there's all kinds of other plausible explanations, such as we know that Trump doesn't want to give foreign aid to pretty much any country. Such as
Trump's call to make.
Well, I know, I understand that, but that's a different issue as to whether or not this is impeachment, whether it was extortion. That's just you saying Trump's using executive power more than he should, which, by the way, I agree he and all presidents, at least in my lifetime before him, have done. I find that to be a very reasonable criticism of Trump, that he's expanded.
Why has Trump kept so many people from testifying?
And so you can see this is another kind of deflection. Yeah, clearly clever. I doubt he does really like Biden as well. But the problem is they can't throw Biden under the bus for this specific thing. Because if they do, then they're acknowledging that what they would have to sell to the American people is this. Yes, they're the exact same thing we're criticizing Trump for doing. We know the Obama administration and Biden did. But we defended it then, and now we think it's worth impeaching Trump. Even the average American person that's not that invested in politics is going to be like, wait, what? So literally 2 years ago, you were okay with this exact same situation happening? And so they can't argue that it's just the process of it. Now, if you see here, you notice what he does is where I go on to talk about like specifically how we don't have proof of this and we know there's other plausible explanation. He changes the subject and says, well, then why won't Trump leave people testify? But again, this is nonsense. If you're innocent, why don't you give up all of your privacy? I mean, Trump's already gone above and beyond what any other president's done. He released the summary of the call. You know? 2 calls so far he's released the summary of. That's unprecedented in the fact that I can't think of any other president that's done something like that. Yeah, he doesn't want his people testifying because the entire idea is that they're trying to get people to stumble up so that they could charge him with some crime. It's the same reason that Trump didn't want to testify in the Mueller hearings in person, because it's a perjury trap. That's what they're trying to do. We saw what they did with Stone, Manafort, Papadopoulos, Flynn. They try to say, oh, you lied about something, now we're going to throw you in jail and ruin your life unless you flip on Trump. I don't blame Trump. It's clear this isn't in good faith. And why doesn't Destiny and everyone else apply the same standard to Schiff? Why doesn't Schiff have the whistleblower testify? Why doesn't Schiff himself testify about what he and his people talked to the whistleblower about? Why doesn't Schiff have Hunter and Joe Biden testify? And when I ask Destiny that, he'll say, oh, that's all what about it? So in other words, it's okay for one side to say, well, we not only will not have people testify, not only will we not even, all of the transcripts we have of the closed door testimony, we won't even release that, the ones that make Trump look good. We'll only bring the witnesses that all the witnesses that the Republicans request we won't allow because they might Trump look good. But Destiny and the Democrats are okay with that. But if Trump doesn't want Giuliani to testify, then clearly that means he's guilty of something. I mean, it's just, to me, a ridiculous double standard. But let's go on.
If he thinks that he's in the clear, or whatever, if he thinks that he's fine, why has he kept so many people, like all the people that could either exonerate him or convict him, I guess, depending on their testimony? Why has he kept people from testifying if he thinks he's so much in the clear?
Well, because it's his right. Because why did he release the transcript? Like, he's been asked to do
He didn't
things.
release a transcript, to be clear. That wasn't a word-for-word transcript of the call. That was like a summary.
Yes, but even the Democrat witnesses admitted that it was that the summary acts as an effective transcript
accurate,
because
sure.
it was pretty accurate. I think they quibbled about, did the word company, was that replaced with the word Burisma? But I'll give you that. I understand what you're saying. But it's this.
And see, this is a comment that I hear often from people on the left. They want to quibble about these things that literally mean nothing. So I had many people at the start of the impeachment hearing saying, oh, we can't trust the transcript at all. It could all be lies. Trump could have literally demanded a quid pro quo in the actual transcript because what we have is just a summary, not a transcript. But then simultaneously, they'd bring witness after witness that didn't hear the phone call but would say, well, when I heard what was on the phone call via the summary or the transcript, that's when I was troubled by X, Y, and Z. So why is it okay to say, oh, we could be troubled by what we saw in the summary or the transcript, and that part of the troubling nature of it must be true. But when you say, okay, but then when we look, there was no quid pro quo, well, maybe that was left out. I mean, it seems nonsense. And then that's devastated by the fact that the Democrat witnesses that actually listened into the phone call, like Vindman, admit, yes, the transcript was accurate. There was 1 or 2 words that were changed that basically doesn't change the meaning of the phone call. So, and it's a de facto transcript. At this point, that shoots down the narrative that, oh, maybe he secretly said quid pro quo. And for Destiny to bring it up here, I mean, I guess if you want to quibble about the semantics of it, but he quickly admits it's a de facto transcript because that's what the Democratic witnesses have admitted to, that the summary was accurate.
The same argument could be used all the time. You could use the same argument for Biden. Why is Schiff refusing to let the whistleblower testify? Why is Schiff refusing to have Joe or Hunter Biden testify? Now, this isn't one about it.
Why do we? Yeah, it is. Why do we keep pivoting to these guys? The question is whether or not Trump abused his power of the president to withhold foreign aid until an investigation was announced by Ukraine. That's the question. Fuck Biden and Obama and Hillary and John F. Kennedy and anybody else you want to talk about. None of these people matter to this. I don't care about any. I don't like any of these people. I'm not going to defend them.
I'm not asking.
Okay, now notice my point wasn't, oh, well, Trump. My point wasn't like a whataboutism. Well, Trump shouldn't have to have his people testify if the other side didn't. I'm making the point that this is a fallacious argument that you hear all the time. You know, well, if you're not guilty of everything, then you should be open into an investigation into yourself. You should say everyone connected to you should testify in front of Congress or in front of the FBI. That's nonsense. right? Like, we know that's nonsense. And I'm saying, look, in regards specifically to this impeachment hearing, we have two sides. You have the Republicans and the Democrat side. If you're going to say side X won't allow everyone to testify, therefore there must be some sort of corruption or guilt there. Well, if side Y is also withholding people testifying and withholding evidence, then that must prove that there's some corruption there by the same standard. You don't get to say, oh, one side's clearly corrupt and the other side's clearly not for this same action. So I just don't understand what his argument is here. And he claims that that's me engaged in whataboutism. But again, it's not. And remember, it's not whataboutism to want people that have material information about what was being discussed on that call. What was it that we're saying was unethical or corrupt or a crime for Trump to be discussing? A possible investigation into his political opponent. You've heard Destiny say it 6 or 7 times in this very debate. Therefore, it would stand that we should find out whether or not there should be an investigation into that political opponent. That would involve calling forth the people that the investigation could be about, such as Hunter and Joe Biden. But the fact that those people aren't allowed to testify, or people like Alexandra Chalupa, who was a Democrat that was accused of possibly trying to work with Ukrainian officials to get dirt on Trump, the fact that Schiff won't allow those people to testify seems to be at least as dubious as the fact that Trump doesn't want Giuliani and others to testify. So I'm just saying you can't have it both ways. And the idea that this keeps being called whataboutism, I think is trying to conflate the issue. It's not whataboutism when it's directly material to the issue we're talking about. And let me just give a quick example real quick. Let's just say that 2020 Trump wins and the Republicans unanimously win the House and the Senate, so they control all three, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. What if the Republicans would just decide to say, oh, we're going to hold the Obama and people under him in criminal, we're going to have investigations into the criminal actions they took into the investigation of Trump, right? Now, imagine then that as the defense of Obama and the people connected to him would be, well, we actually had evidence that we thought that people connected to Trump committed crimes. That's why we were doing the investigation. And the Republicans bang the gavel and say, whataboutism? That's a whataboutism. You talking about Trump's a whataboutism. Now, Destiny and every objective person, definitely every Democrat's going to say, how is that whataboutism? You're accusing Obama and the people in his administration of corruptly investigating Trump. So us being able to talk about, look, this is why we're investigating, would be material to this discussion. They would be right. But it's the exact opposite here. Here they say, oh, no, we can't talk about the Bidens. We can't talk about Burisma. We can't talk about Ukrainian election interference because that's whataboutism. And I think anyone with a cursory understanding of what this impeachment's about understands that's not the case.
To defend him. The point is, if there is reason for an investigation, then what Trump did wasn't impeachable. If there is
not true.
Sure it is.
Even if they did something bad, even if Biden's son was the fucking devil incarnate, even if Epstein, all the child rape was directed by Hunter Biden himself, that still doesn't excuse Trump withholding aid until an investigation is announced by the Ukraine.
Would you admit that it's not cut and dry, it's more of a political calculus when it comes to impeachment?
That's not what we're talking about at all right now, but of course.
Right, so the argument would be then, what you're saying is the Democrats will say, we're fully admitting that Obama and Biden did exactly what we're accusing Trump of right now. And we're fully admitting that not only do we not want them impeached, but we're saying that even wanting an investigation into that is a bad idea and criminal. But Trump should still be impeached for this.
Fuck Obama and Biden. Okay,
but that's not them.
We can't impeach them. We can't impeach them. They're not in office anymore.
Sure, you can still impeach
in terms of criminal, what?
I believe you could impeach a past president. It wouldn't have much effect, but
okay,
I think that's the law.
If you can, I've never heard that before.
I think you can. I don't know.
Even if you could, then fuck him. Then do it. I don't care. But that still doesn't exonerate Trump.
But no, but it's not them that I'm concerned about. It's the Democrats like Schiff, like Pelosi, like Schumer. Because we know then if our argument then becomes, well, Trump should go down for this, even though we know the Democrats did this 4 years ago, and many of those same Democrats were okay with it then and are now voting to impeach. That's the double standard, and that's because it's a political.
Okay with what then? Nobody else was withholding aid from foreign countries
Yes.
in exchange for.
That's exactly what Biden admitted to. That's what the Obama administration did.
Now, I think it's clear at this point, he just has no clue as to what Biden admitted to, right? And yeah, clearly clever. That's exactly the point. And I know, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I talk to you all the time, but Kishkia, you've followed me enough on ATS to know that's been my stance since the beginning of any investigation into Trump. If Trump committed crimes, I have no problem with him being held accountable for those crimes. Even if I didn't like why the investigation started, I still feel the law should be applied. All I ask is for equal application of the law. And in every instance, we can see every single person connected to Trump that's been charged or accused of a crime. We have evidence of either the exact same crime or a more severe version of it or a more blatant version being committed by people in the intel community or connected to Hillary and the Democrats. Literally everyone lying to the FBI. We know that Mills and Abedin lied to the FBI when they said they had no knowledge of Hillary's server until after her tenure as Secretary of State. We know that from released emails that we've seen of theirs. Flynn, I've gone through his 302. I don't even think he did lie to the FBI, but yet he was charged with it. Or how about lying to Congress? We know Cohen went down for lying to Congress, but we see that Comey lied to Congress. We see that Clapper lied to Congress and all these other people. They didn't go down, right? We see the same when it comes to failing to register as a foreign lobbyist. Manafort worked directly with the Podesta Group. Manafort got sent to solitary confinement. The Podesta Group got to retroactively file paperwork. Over and over again, we see this exact same thing, this double standard of the application of the law. This should trouble you regardless if you're a Trump supporter or not. That's been my take on this the entire time. So for him to keep saying, whataboutism, but how many times can we then accept this argument? So, okay, let's say that he's right. Let's say that Destiny's right. Fine, let's impeach Trump. He abused his power. No president has the right to threaten to withhold aid that was congressionally approved. So we get rid of Trump. Now, in 2020, we get Elizabeth Warren's president or whoever, and they do the exact same thing. Well, we'll let it go this time. Destiny and others like him won't say a word. The corrupt media that just operates as a mouthpiece for them won't say a word. People won't care about it. And then 4 years later, once Warren's out of there, they'll say, sure, we should have charged Warren with that crime, but we didn't. Let's move on now. That's always the case. This is something that you see the corrupt establishment constantly do. I mean, take a situation such as Bill Clinton. Remember, Bill Clinton wasn't just credibly accused of rape. He actually had people that were on his team, such as James Carville. I mean, Carville said of Juanita Broderick, who credibly accused Clinton of rape, this is what you get when you drag a $20 bill through a trailer park. I mean, he said that publicly. Now, regardless, I do believe in the presumption of innocence. I'm not saying that we should treat Bill Clinton as if he's guilty. But to someone who's accusing someone of rape, and that's what one of the high-ranking people on your team say, look like what happens when you drag money through a trailer park? And that was accepted. Nowadays, though, when it's used to go after Trump and Trump's boorish language and jokes about grabbing by the P word and things like that, the same media that let Trump and his team get away with that. By the way, James Carville's been a darling of the mainstream media for years. He was never held to account for that. Now they're like, oh, you're right. We should have said something at the time about that. That's what they constantly do. So this isn't whataboutism. It's wanting equal application of the law. And it's actually directly material. But it's clear that Destiny doesn't understand what's going on. I mean, we're 20 minutes into this debate, and he's literally making the claim no other president's ever withheld congressional approved aid. That's clearly not the case. That was discussed in the first 30 seconds of this debate, and he admitted, maybe I should look at that Biden stuff more. So before you have such a strong position that you're saying this is completely unprecedented, therefore this president should be impeached, maybe you should have a basic understanding of the facts surrounding the case. And again, the issue isn't directly Biden or Obama. That's not what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about with the whataboutism. I'm not saying it's okay for Trump to do something because Biden did it. I'm saying the group I'm criticizing right now is the Democrats demanding impeachment. Those same Democrats were okay when Biden did quid pro quo, but have a problem if Trump did quid pro quo. That's what makes them hypocrites, and that's the unequal application of the law. The same with the media. I'm not looking directly at Biden and Obama or Trump. I'm looking at the people that are judging them. If you say it was okay for Biden to do a quid pro quo, but Trump should be impeached from it, you're a hypocrite. And you're not interested in equal application of the law, period. And yeah, Kishki, this type of stuff does happen all the time. It's just we don't get direct access to the phone calls. I would like to hear the phone calls between Iran and Obama. Who knows what kind of quid pro quo was given in order for that aid to be given? We have no clue. We don't know oftentimes when the executive branch, I mean, it is a problem. I think that the executive branch under my entire life has had too much power when it comes to things like foreign trade, launching weapons or bombs and things like that. I think that they should listen to Congress more. But this type of thing happens over and over again. Again, look at things like the DACA situation when Obama was ignoring laws that Congress passed. That was deemed okay. I don't remember Destiny or all the Democrats saying, impeach Obama. How dare he ignore the laws that Congress passed? I don't recall that at all. But this one time, suddenly, something that happens all the time, executives slightly overextending their power, happens all the time. This one time, that's grounds for impeachment, we're being told. And it's clear that I think that either Destiny's very ignorant of what's going on here, or he's being very disingenuous, because I think we all know it's not that the Democrats are impeaching him for the process of, oh, this was congressionally approved, therefore you can't threaten to withhold it. They know they can't do that, because then they would have to admit, yeah, it was bad when Obama and Biden did that as well. So they're saying it's not the quid pro quo that it was the problem, it's that it was the quid pro quo to help Trump in the 2020 election. That's why my stance and what I wanted this debate to be about was there reason for Trump to want to investigate the Bidens in 2016 Ukrainian election interference? I believe the answer is quite clearly yes. But what's happening is Destiny's trying to get out of that debate and saying, oh, no, that's all whataboutism. All we need to know was the process incorrect, if so, impeach. And I think that's ignorant or disingenuous.
Exactly what they did.
Biden was not the president.
Right, Obama, he said in his conversation, he said, I told them you have 6 hours to fire this prosecutor or I'm withholding $1 billion aid. They said to Biden, in Biden's own word, you're not the president. Biden said, call him. He said that we could do this. So yeah, you're right. It's not Biden. It's the Obama administration. He gave Biden the go-ahead to withhold aid that was congressionally approved unless they fired a prosecutor who happened to be looking into Biden's son.
Okay, I don't know if that's 100% true because I haven't looked into that. I suspect that that's exactly how it went down. I'm pretty sure the rationale there was far different because there was a lot of corruption surrounding that prosecutor. I don't know 100% if that's true. That's what I've heard, but I haven't looked into that.
And here we go. See, now we're back to, and this is what often happens. You have this multi-tiered defense, and it's like, working your way through sludge to get to the truth, to get to what you're really trying to say. So because this doesn't seem to be, and again, this might be unfair of me, and I am judging without knowing fully, but it almost seems to me like Destiny's trying to win a debate instead of to get to the truth of things. And so you take a position that you think's the easiest to prove. Oh, all I have to do is prove Trump committed this process crime, and then that's that. And then, all I have to do is prove that it was a quid pro quo, and then that's that. And then once we dig through that for 40 minutes, then it comes to, well, okay, maybe that's what Biden did as well, but Biden did it for good reasons. This is exactly what the debate was supposed to be about from the first place. Okay, so now your argument is, he seems to be deflecting to, well, even if Biden did that, it seemed to be because it was for legitimate reasons to end corruption. Okay, then the argument is, if there was a good reason for Trump to do this, then there's no case for impeachment. Yeah, and you're right, clearly clever. It's not, this isn't stuff, it's funny how he accuses me at one point. He says he thinks it's funny how I'll listen to any little thing, but I won't listen to the testimony of these witnesses or the conclusions of the FBI. But I don't think that's the case whatsoever. And I would actually counter that by saying it's funny that he's willing to listen to hearsay. He's willing to listen to all these witnesses who, by the way, have skin in the game. These aren't unbiased people. He's willing to listen to their presumptions, but he won't listen to the public admission of people like Joe Biden, who publicly admitted to a quid pro quo, or to people like Sergei Lyshenko, a Ukrainian parliamentarian who publicly admitted to interfering in the election to help Hillary. Those public admissions aren't good enough evidence, but hearsay does become good enough evidence. Now, one of the things I didn't get to talk about in this debate, and I guess I'll mention here, because it was moving so fast and the topics were changing so much, is we keep acting like these witnesses that were brought forth by the Democrats, most of them from the State Department, are somehow unbiased actors and we need to take their word about presumptions as very credible. But one of the biggest stories that's occurred in the past 3 weeks that I see almost no one except me talk about is we have public admissions from George Kent, who was one of the Democrats' first witnesses, who was at the State Department. On page 70 of his closed-door testimony, he admits that, yes, he directly told Ukrainian prosecutors to drop investigations into Obama allies, including into Lyshenko and Artem Sitnik, who was at the NABU, who were interfering in the 2016 election to help Hillary. Let me slow down and repeat that again. The State Department that all of these people are testifying from, Democrats and everyone, that election interference is the most important thing we can investigate. And now we know that these same witnesses and the agency that they work for were actually pressuring the Ukraine to drop investigations into that election interference. But we have to just take these people at face value. No, I didn't get to talk about any of this because he would just scream, whataboutism, who cares? But these are the direct witnesses against Trump engaged in the very behavior that they are criticizing Trump for. This isn't hearsay, unlike what they're saying. This is direct evidence from one of their witnesses, George Kent. So either George Kent's telling the truth, which means that Yovanovitch and all the rest of them are lying, or George Kent is lying. Either way, some of the witnesses are lying under oath about what was going on. We'll keep going.
But even if that was all true, even if Obama himself said, fuck you, blah, 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 and withheld aid, it still doesn't exonerate Trump.
Well, it does in the sense that I think that it's okay for us to engage in foreign policy. I have no problem with our executive authority withholding foreign aid to get something in exchange, as long as it's to benefit the country and not to benefit yourself personally.
It's to benefit Trump.
But that's why the starting question is, that's why it's not whataboutism. If we could prove that there
If
was
we knew about this all the time, why didn't Trump do this investigation at any time over the past 4 years?
Well,
Why have we waited?
Okay, now did you see what just happened here? Again, he now shifts back to the problem was this was to benefit Trump. My stance is very consistent. Again, even when it came to investigations of Trump, I did not have a problem, right? I did not until it was done in a corrupt fashion, right? Thanks, Kishki. I didn't have a problem with it. He keeps changing his position. He keeps saying, no, it was the process, then no, it was the quid pro quo. And now he's saying, well, this was to benefit Trump. Again, yes, this is the argument that the Democrats are making. We could have cut through all of the first 30 minutes of this and just got to that. It's not an unreasonable stance to say, if Trump issued this quid pro quo with congressional tax dollars to personally benefit himself, that would be problematic. I agree with that position. So then we need to investigate, was this to personally benefit Trump? Or could there have been reasons to want this investigation that were for the good of the country? I would argue the latter. I would argue that the potential misuse of $1 billion by the Obama-Biden administration to get a prosecutor fired that was looking into Biden's son's company is very much worth investigating. In fact, that's the exact type of corruption you want our executive authorities investigating. $1 billion U.S. tax dollars? It's a huge deal. And that's exactly the type of corruption you would want to be outing in the Ukraine as well. Right? So I don't understand that when he says, well, this was all to personally benefit Trump. Okay, we're back to square one. That's why it's not whataboutism. That's what I'm trying to tell him. See, he keeps saying, oh, this was to personally benefit Trump. That means he's saying the investigation into Biden was to personally benefit Trump. Therefore, it's not whataboutism to talk about that material key question. Should there have been an investigation into Biden? Unfortunately, because of the way this debate went, I didn't get to present I feel is overwhelming evidence that there should be 3 investigations, one into Burisma, second into the Biden's connection to it, both Hunter Biden and Joe Biden forcing the firing of the prosecutor, and third, an investigation into Ukrainian election interference and State Department officials that were pressuring Ukrainian prosecutors to drop that investigation. And there's a solid point to what you're saying there, Kishkia, in that if this was all about helping Trump in the 2020 election, why wouldn't Trump wait until Biden was the candidate to spring this call with Zelensky, right? At that point, it would have been very difficult had Zelensky announced an investigation into Biden. It would have been difficult for the Democrats to then all of a sudden switch, have another convention, appoint another candidate. It would have been chaos. It would have been hugely strategically advantageous for Trump to just hold off until Biden won the nomination to ask for this investigation. Instead, he did it way far outside. So he's taking a big chance. If Biden, by the time that any investigation would have concluded, there's a really good chance, and I think you agree with me, Kishke, as well, that Biden won't even be the nominee. He won't even be anything in the Democratic Party. So why would Trump take this huge risk of supposedly breaking the law for personal benefit for someone who stands to be a pretty good chance of not even being involved in the election? All he had to do was wait until Biden won the nomination. Then maybe it would have made sense. So, yeah, I mean, I think you have a point that Biden wasn't a serious candidate in the first place. All right, moving on.
Till now.
Sure, if you watch the testimony from all the Democratic witnesses, all of them said verbatim over and over, Zelensky is finally a guy that's anti-corruption.
Real quick, he then pivots that he says, why would Trump do this now? And I'll give you the answer here, because Zelensky is an anti-corruption guy, and this is Trump's first call with him.
the real deal. He's surrounding himself with prosecutors to fight corruption. I don't know if you knew this, but Zelensky was basically the Jon Stewart of Ukraine. He's a stand-up comic. And you had, this is real quick, if you give me 30 seconds, this is just my layman's view of what's going on in Ukraine. You had like 2014, you had this president, Yanukovych, who was like a pro-Putin stooge. Then he gets removed for Poroshenko, who's basically a Western stooge. The people of Ukraine are just sick and tired of it, just like me and you would be with our political system. They just want someone looking out for themselves. So 75% of them vote for a stand-up comedian. This is Trump's first attempt to talk to this person. And so he's just like, hey, are you going to investigate corruption that occurred in the past administration?
Okay.
And that's why I think
I guess we'll just have to wait and see how the impeachment hearings turn out, and we'll go from there. Like I said, I'm not super invested in this topic. I find it strange how much charitability we extend when we're Republican to Trump, and then how like quick we are to convict past presidents who are Democrats of certain crimes. But I don't really care much about the impeachment stuff. We'll wait and see.
Well, if I could just say, I don't.
Now, it could be true that Destiny doesn't really care about the impeachment stuff, but I don't think that disproves my position. And I think that that's a mistake on his point, because as someone who's going to vote Democrat and someone who's apparently concerned about politics, it's clear that this is the biggest political story right now in the country. And it is the main strategy of the opposition party, the Democrat Party. So I think that, look, we all have interests in what we are interested in. There are things that are political hot button issues that I just don't spend a lot of time on. Things like abortion, gay rights, things like that. So I get it. I'm not judging Destiny for not taking an interest in this, but I think that this is indicative to what I think is the biggest problem in the country, which is corruption from the establishment. And he would later laugh at me. I don't know if we'll get to this part of the debate, because I'd be here till 5 a.m. if we do this with the whole hour and a half debate. But kind of laughing at me as a conspiracy theorist for thinking that there's a problem with the establishment and things like that. But at the same time, maybe you shouldn't do that if you're admitting, well, I actually don't take an interest in any of the things that would prove that corruption. Right? So, I mean, it just seems, and I think clearly clever. I think Destiny realizes, I gather at least from that exchange, he doesn't really have much to say to disprove what I'm saying. And so he's just like, okay, well, I don't think it's important. Again, that's fine, but it is worth mentioning that at this point, as I glanced at kind of what his audience was saying, they've already said that, and personal insults aside, but they've said that I'm a liar, I don't know anything, I'm the biggest moron they've ever heard from. Everything I said was a lie. There's literally no case for anything I'm saying. Trump's clearly guilty, that I'm deflecting, I'm pivoting, I'm changing the topic over and over. I think if you watch so far what we've gone through, that's not the case. I would think that if anyone was deflecting and changing topics, it went the other way. Now, as to Destiny's claim there that I'm more charitable to Trump than I were to past administrations, I will admit that my bias probably would lean towards that, and I'll explain to him here exactly how that might be the case. But my opinion's hardly what's relevant, right? The opinion of those that control the cultural institutions of power, such as the mainstream media, academia, the entertainment industry, Silicon Valley, and particularly those that control the laws and investigations, such as the intel community, the prominent party or the majority party in the House that's having these impeachment hearings. Those are the opinions that matter more. Why are you so concerned about me, Joe Schmo's opinion on being charitable with one? If you were really concerned about a misapplication of how we're treating these things, you would care more about how the investigators and the law enforcement people, such as the FBI and the CIA, the intel agencies, are treating it, not some schlub like me on the internet, right? I don't know. That's my feeling on it. But we go on a little here. I guess still a while, but
And I understand, and you're perfectly within your rights and probably correct to assume, to paint with a broad brush. I think that people on all sides tend to be super forgiving and super one-sided when defending their side, and I'm guilty of that as well. But I am telling you, I had no problem with Obama working with foreign allies to investigate Trump for possible collusion with Russia, or Obama's DOJ or whatever. So I don't think that that's the case. And I think that also I'm trying to get is, I think for you and your audience, and correct me if I'm wrong in painting with a broad brush, I would guess that most of you dislike Trump and probably would want to see Trump at least lose the 2020 election. And I would point you to people like Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald, because I think they're right that all of these investigations are actually harming Democrats' chances of beating Trump in 2020.
You want to talk about an optics point of view? I don't think impeachment is good at all, but that's a totally different question
Sure.
about whether or not Trump has committed crimes or whether or not you should be worried at how Trump is acting in the office of president.
But I think, though, that I'm...
okay, and this was one of my strategies coming in here. As a debater, you have to understand you're not just debating your opposition, you're also debating for an audience, anyone who could listen live or listen, in the future at some point. And there's going to be people that tend to agree with me. I always put it this way. There's basically 5 types of people in an audience. People that will always agree with you or never agree with you. Then there are people that lean towards agreeing with you or lean towards disagreeing with you. And then there are people directly in the middle that are totally ignorant of what you're talking about or just undecided on it. It's hard to reach those outer 2 groups, change their mind, but the center groups are who you're debating for. Knowing that I was going to have a huge platform of 4,000 people or so, and if he would put this up on his YouTube channel even more, that were fans of Destiny and therefore probably not Trump supporters, one of the arguments that I tried to make about the corruption of the intel agencies and the dangers of supporting them and the establishment, whether it be establishment State Department, establishment intel agency people like the whistleblower, one of the dangers you have if you're on the left and you're supporting them is those same people will actually come after a candidate that you might support in the future that's a real progressive or a real liberal. You see it with Tulsi Gabbard. You see that kind of happen with Bernie in 2016. So I'm trying to kind of put an olive branch out there to saying, like, look, just because you hate Trump, that's fine. Beat him at the ballot box. Be very vocal in why you dislike Trump. No problem with that. But when you kind of cheer on these shady mechanisms from the corrupt intel community and the corrupt establishment to try to remove Trump illegitimately, and actually ends up harming our democracy and actually ends up going to harm any candidate on your side that would really care about your issues as well. And, of course, that kind of gets shut down. But that's what I was trying to do there.
More worried the fact that we have an entire establishment, particularly the establishment Democrats, that are doing everything possible to cover up the actual investigation we should be having, which was 2016 Ukrainian election interference and the Bidens and their role in the Burisma company. I mean, we were told...
probably wouldn't end well if we were to do that, because that, the Yukovich, whatever the what was the guy's name?
Yukановich.
Manafort extensively helped that guy's campaign. So I'm guessing that anything you dig up there is probably going to come back on Trump to some extent as well, because Trump decided to surround himself with people like Manafort. So, I mean, I doubt that he's very invested in any type of investigation that involves that anyway. So,
well, I mean, but that's kind of the crux of this in the first place. We were told for 3 years that foreign election interference is the biggest deal in our country. No stone could be left unturned. Now we have public admissions in the Financial Times of August 2016 from a parliamentarian in Ukraine named Lyshenko admitting that he worked with the Anti-Corruption Bureau, which is the FBI of Ukraine, in releasing a black ledger about Manafort because he wanted to swing the election for Hillary. Now that's election interference. We also have proof that there was a DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa that actually was working with officials in Ukraine to get that dirt. That's exactly what Trump was accused of for 3 years. But every single Democrat on the impeachment testimony said, "Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory."
Did this? Fuck. I don't think. I feel like I've heard about this, and I feel like none of this actually happened.
Oh, it happened. I mean, I could send you the evidence via email or whatever.
Do you think that there was any?
Now, I mean, that's a pretty startling admission. Like, yeah, I've heard of all this, and I don't think any of it happened. In other words, it's all been debunked. If you've been following me on Twitter or on Above Top Secret or any of my YouTube videos, you understand my frustration with this, such as the reporting of John Solomon. I did a big video where he put out 28 points to everyone sourced about the situation with the Biden's Burisma 2016 Ukrainian election interference, and he sourced them oftentimes through testimony from these very same witnesses or official government documents from the Ukraine or from the United States, etc. And basically, the way that people on the left deal with this is they say, okay, take everything John Solomon says and throw it in the garbage because he's a crappy person and everything's been debunked. But it hasn't. None of the specifics have been talked about. And again, once more, that's exactly what we get here, which was going into this debate, I was afraid would happen. Yeah, I think I heard about that, but it's all garbage, right? No, it's not. And, you could say that if you want, but that's not a good faith effort in getting into the truth. Now, to Destiny's credit, he will later say that he'll look into stuff. So maybe he'll look into this. I'm not saying he has to agree with me. Maybe he'll look in and he'll find evidence that I haven't seen that counters the evidence that I'm presenting. But just to say it's all been debunked, I haven't seen it anywhere. All I've seen is people linking places like BuzzFeed and CNN saying John Solomon's a crappy person. That's it. That's not debunking anything. And so for someone who supported the Russia investigation, and you'll hear talk about how severe Russia's interference were in our election, including through the Internet Research Agency, those 12 Russian trolls, you'll hear him talk about how that was a bigger deal than I think it is. Yet you don't have a problem. You're willing to just write off actual public admissions from Ukrainian politicians that they're interfering in the election to help Hillary? You're willing to write that off? Russian trolls posting on Pokemon Go is important to you. It deserved an investigation, and you'll brag about the indictments. But with Ukraine helping Hillary, all of a sudden we could just brush it off. It seems that you should do, I don't know. I'm trying to be fair to him here. I guess not everyone could hear all the evidence, but I think that maybe he's relying a little too much on just the reporting from the mainstream media instead of looking at the source documentation himself. So hopefully he'll do that, I guess.
Any conspiracy like the Guccifer hacking with Russia working with Assange or anything like that, or do you believe that all of that is fake? Or
and real quick, what he's trying to do here is then pivot to where, and I know exactly what's coming. He's trying to say, oh, okay, so I've presented what I think is evidence of Ukrainian election interference. So he'll say, oh, okay, well, real quick on the Russia thing, do you believe Mueller when he said that Guccifer was a Russian? Because what he wants to be able to do is if I would say, well, no, I don't believe that, then he could tell his whole audience, see, this is just a crazy conspiracy theorist. Don't believe anything he says. He doesn't trust our FBI, blah, blah, blah. Instead, I will go on to give a nuanced discussion of what I think the Mueller report showed, which is when I'm discussing things with him and with many people, and in fact, when I'm discussing in most of my videos online, I'm operating under the assumption that the Mueller investigation as to Russian hacks of the DNC and Podesta is true. Now, I have incredible questions about that. But all of my argumentations can still apply in a world where that is true. That's the argument I'm going to try to make. So I'm not going to take the bait. Yeah, of course. Trump would be great to start using Pokemon in ads. It would be a great meme. And he doesn't get that either. He doesn't understand that's where these Russian trolls first started posting ads was on Pokemon Go. People were confused when I bring that up, but I guess they're just not informed enough. But so remember, that's the tactic that he's trying to employ here. He wants me to say, oh, no, I think Seth Rich. That's what he wants me to say. He wants me to say the name Seth Rich so he can say, okay, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, therefore I don't have to listen to anything you say. End of discussion, game over, I win. That's what he's trying to get, and of course, that's not what I believe, and I understood that's the admission he was trying to get, so.
I don't know. I'm very distrusting of the intelligence community. I have questions, for example, as to why the intelligence community would capitulate to the DNC and not get their hands on the physical server. But I'm willing to say, I could say...
They didn't get their hands on the physical server because they didn't need the physical server. It wasn't necessary. Like, you don't need a physical drive to analyze the contents of the drive. So you can take an image of the drive. You don't really need... Having a physical drive doesn't really do anything. Right?
But we know that from Comey's own testimony that the FBI prefers to have the physical copy because their worry is they're the best professionals at this in the world, and they don't want to rely on a possible mistake copying from a private company like CrowdStrike. So the FBI actually did request, and the DNC denied allowing access to the physical. Why would they do that unless they had something that, if it was going to be the exact same as getting a copy, what incentive does it?
So like the Ukraine interference stuff that you brought up, I'm briefly familiar with. I'm uncomfortable talking about it, but I'm like 99% sure that isn't.
And so you see, he just totally changes the subject. And he wanted to talk about Guccifer, so when I start to talk about it, and I'm like, why didn't they get access to the physical server? Well, they didn't need it. Yeah, but they wanted it. And again, this is a question I've never had answered. If the physical server, a copy is the exact same thing as the physical server, and we believe Comey that the FBI's preferred method is to have access to the actual physical server, and the Democrats were saying this was an attack on them, it was an act of war, it possibly swung the election for Trump, it was the biggest thing that needed investigated for decades going back, then why would the Democrats not allow the FBI to use their preferred method? I mean, it just makes no sense. And I'm not just right-wing people saying that. If you listen to left-wing people that hate Trump, like Jimmy Dore, like Glenn Greenwald, like Aaron Mattei, they all say the same thing. We knew that this stunk the moment that the FBI, the moment the DNC refused to allow the FBI to look at the physical server. And I'm not a genius. I'll admit, I don't understand the ins and outs of exactly what a copy of a server, how it could be exactly the same or different, if there's ways to only copy 80% and leave off 20% of things you want, or if there's ways to make that copy seem as if someone else did something nefarious. Now, I think clearly clever, Comey admitted that the FBI originally did ask for access to the server and then were told no by the DNC. And then they received a redacted copy from CrowdStrike. But regardless, either way, it would be bad. If the FBI didn't ask to see the original server, that's bad, because the DNC should have demanded they look at the physical server. And if the FBI did ask but was rebuked by the DNC, that's terrible. So instead of answering that, because no one's able to answer that, they just say, oh, okay, so we'll move on. Yeah, and it's definitely BS. Again, I'm not a computer genius, or I don't even know how much of a genius you'd have to be to understand this. I've had computer experts tell me both ways. A copy, it would be impossible to fake a copy in any way whatsoever. I'd had other people say that's not true. You could selectively leave stuff out or selectively add material, so a copy wouldn't be 100% perfect. My point is, I know BS when I see it, and I know the fact that the FBI never looked at the physical server as BS. If it was exactly the same, there would be no reason not to have access to the physical server, especially when Comey admits that it is the FBI's preferred method to have access to the physical server. So if this is the biggest crime with the biggest stakes, why wouldn't the FBI use their preferred method? Nonetheless, it's not really relevant to the debate we're having here, but I just wanted to bring up when he tries to change the subject to something like that to make me look bad, and I think I give a pretty commonsensical answer to it, then we right back to deflecting. He'll oftentimes try to come back to this Guccifer point, trying to paint me as a conspiracy theorist because he doesn't know how to handle the actual facts that I'm presenting about the Ukrainian election interference. So he needs to make me look like a crazy person instead of looking into those actual facts. That way he could easily, to his audience, dispense with all of the facts that I'm giving. And I hope that I did a good job not allowing that to happen.
Entirely baseless conspiracy theory.
It's
like,
not. I could
that pushed that got fired for like corruption or some shit. None of that actually happened the way that. But the fact that but maybe that did happen. But the fact that you're so willing to believe that, but you're saying I don't really trust the FBI's conclusion on the investigations that they did. That's highly suspect to me. Like, so you think that all of the indictments that Mueller made relating to those Russians, the Internet Research Agency, the shell company that operated US, all of that was 100% fabricated and fake.
No. I'm not saying I don't.
No, that's not what I said. And I won't call it a straw man right now because maybe he'll hear out my explanation. But again, it's not that I'm willing to believe this crazy conspiracy theory like he's putting out there. Everything that I've talked about thus far, whether it be Biden's quid pro quo or Lyshenko releasing this black ledger, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is their own words. The Democrats that are defending Biden, I've actually seen this. One of the biggest defense they give of Biden is, oh, Biden lied in that video of himself. So we shouldn't investigate Biden because he's just lying? I mean, when your defense is, I'm unwilling to believe this person's own words, and that's why there should be an investigation, it seems that maybe you're the conspiracy theorist, or you're the one believing radical things, not me. It's the same with Lyshenko. Lyshenko admitted this. I keep telling him, I'm like, look, Financial Times, August 2016, look it up, but he won't do it. And so he's saying, I find it suspicious you would believe them, but you wouldn't believe the FBI's conclusion. Again, I'm not saying. Why would I have any reason to distrust Lyshenko's own words? And with the FBI, again, I didn't tell him I don't believe. I said I'm operating on the assumption that the Russians did hack. But remember, we've been lied to over and over by our intel agencies. Remember overthrowing the Shah? You remember Castro? You remember arming the Mujahideen, which became the Taliban in the 70s? You remember Libya? You remember Afghanistan? Remember Iraq? Remember Gulf of Tonkin? How many times are we going to get lied to by this group? And every time the media and everyone says, oh, our bad, we should have asked more questions of the FBI. My stance is real simple. I don't believe something until I personally see proof of it. To the best, I mean, it's clearly not like I need to physically see it, but when the FBI says just trust us, when the CIA says just trust us, I'm like, I want to see some sort of evidence. Remember, let's go back to this. They said just trust us on these chemical attacks in Syria. Now we know from whistleblowers at the OPCW that it turns out that chemical attack wasn't directed by Assad and maybe never occurred in the first place. Yet we still had to drop bombs. We still had to just pretend the intel agency was right. He would have said, oh, Rob's a crazy conspiracy theorist for questioning the intel community, but it turns out they were wrong. So I don't know. He's trying to pigeonhole me, again, to try to just paint me as this conspiracy theorist, and I'm going to push back again against that.
In fact, I'm saying I'm basically agnostic on the hack. It could very well be that the FBI, I don't know enough technologically wise to know whether or not it happened as is being said. So I'm not condemning that the FBI was wrong about that. And in my argumentation and dealing with these things, I've assumed that they're right when it comes to the hack. Now, I have questions why they didn't get to the physical server, but that's neither here nor there. As far as the Russian trolls and using Pokemon Go, yeah, that's a joke. Not only is it a joke, I'm sure they did it, but for example, a judge actually admonished Barr and Mueller, saying that they're no longer allowed to publicly say that those people in that agency were connected to Putin because they've presented zero proof. So what we have is 12 people who happen to be Russia that were putting a bunch of stupid memes on Facebook and Twitter. If we're going to act like that seriously affected an election where $500 billion was spent and all sorts of things in the mainstream media, I mean, that's
Wait,
a joke.
okay, hold on. Actually, can you tell me real quick what did you just say that a judge told Barr and someone else that
Mueller and Barr, yes.
Now, I don't mind him asking for proof of this, which I will present it. But again, am I the only one who's found the Russian troll argument? I mean, to me, this is an argument that proves my position and not the left's position. Yeah, it's brought up over and over again. From the outset, I said this is one of the dumbest stories I've ever heard. We're talking about an election that had more money spent in it than any election in history. I believe the number was $500 billion. $500 billion spent on ads, other types of things in this election, more than 2/3 of it by Hillary Clinton's team. And we're supposed to believe that was outweighed by 12 Russian trolls? And if they didn't have a connection to the Russian government, why are 12 trolls who happen to be in Russia any different than 12 trolls that happen to be in the UK or the US or wherever? And even a bigger question than that is, why aren't we then going after actual mainstream media trolls that spread disinformation or spread info to help their particular candidate? I mean, the whole thing's just nonsense. It's laughable at face value. But the Democrats took this serious. Now, here's why it helps my position and not their position. Because if your argument at this point is after everything we know, and you see the Democrats say this all the time, oh, how dare people say that the Mueller investigation was a hoax? Do you know how many people were actually indicted? You know, for one, we had all these Russians that were indicted, these 12 trolls. So they speak to not only the importance of it, but the importance of investigating and the importance of the indictment to show as part of the reason why Mueller's investigation was a good thing. 50% of the Russian interference that Mueller found was these Russian trolls. There were two things, the Russian trolls, the hack of the DNC and Podesta. So this was 50% of the Russia interference. So clearly this was deemed a big deal by the Democrats. Now, if Russian trolls posting things, I don't even remember what the number, well, let's just charitably say $500,000 worth of ads. I think it may have been between 50,000 and 500,000. Let's go with the high number and say 500,000. If we're to believe that $500,000 worth of memes on Twitter and Facebook swung an election where $500 billion were spent, most of which has been admitted weren't seen until after the election, many of which were things like pro-Black Lives Matter, pro-LGBT, and many of which after the election were actually setting up rallies which actually occurred that were against Trump. If we're to believe all of that was so serious that we needed investigations on Capitol Hill, we needed conversations on how to take fake news off the internet, we needed to charge 12 people, and we put that up as evidence of how important the investigation was. Why then isn't it important to investigate a Ukrainian parliamentary member admitting, yes, I interfered in the election by releasing this black ledger to help Hillary Clinton? Because what Fiona Hill said in her closed-door testimony was, oh, I didn't think the Ukrainian election interference was a big deal at all. Who cares? We're more concerned about health care and the economy than we were about some Ukrainian black ledger. But you were really concerned about Pokemon Go ads. You thought that warranted a 3-year investigation. You still brag about how important it was that we got indictments about that. So 12 nobodies in Ukraine that weren't even connected to the Putin government, that's a big deal. But an actual parliamentary member working with the head of basically the FBI in Ukraine to smear Trump with fake evidence, where a Democrat operative, Alexandra Chalupa, was actually trying to get from them. Now all of a sudden, now election interference doesn't matter. That election interference doesn't matter. And it's the same with Destiny here. They'll downplay this Ukrainian election interference, but they blow up the importance of these Russian trolls. Like, if your stance was, I don't care about the Ukrainian election interference, I didn't care about the Russia troll thing either. Okay, at least that's a consistent position. I can see, okay, fair enough. And that's basically the position I took. But if you're like, I thought these trolls were a huge deal, the indictments, we needed an investigation, I think it's a big deal. But I don't have a problem with Ukrainian politicians and intel asset people smearing Trump with fake news from a black ledger, then you might be partisan. You might be being a hypocrite.
What's this judge's name?
It's
so Mueller and Barr are no longer allowed to say the Internet Research Agency was all fake?
No. They're not allowed to say it was directed by Vladimir Putin. They thought that was, the judge found that was actually leading a potential jury because they had presented no proof, even to this judge, that there was any connection to the Russian government whatsoever. And that was the judge that was.
Well, I can wait a few minutes. Can you throw me up a link on that?
Sure, I absolutely will try to do that.
Okay, and I can wait a few minutes. I understand you don't have this on hand.
Yeah, I'm really sorry.
need to see this.
By the way, you're absolutely correct to demand people put sources up, because anyone could see. Sorry, my internet's. So I got this Washington Times article. I think this will do it. And it's, I'll put a link up, but let me just read it real quick to make sure it's the right one, because I'm just getting that. Federal judge sides with Russian company, rebukes Mueller and Barr, from the Washington Times, July 21st. It says, it has chastised Mueller and attorney Barr for stating Russian government was behind the election year social media. The ruling by District Judge Dabney L. Friedrich culminated in a secret legal battle between the Justice Department. And I'll put that link if you want as well. But yeah, basically.
I already have it. Hold on one second. Let me read this.
Sure, please. I'll leave you go.
Okay, so this is saying that basically the judge is telling Mueller and Barr that they're not allowed to state to a jury that the Kremlin was personally involved in the direction of this company, but that it was still a Russian company that was involved in American propaganda, right?
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, which is exactly what I told him. I don't mind him asking for evidence. That's fine. But again, he's quick, just like many. I know I hesitate to do this because it is painting with a broad brush, but maybe you guys think different than me. Doesn't it seem like he just heard how big of a deal these Russian trolls were from the Democrats or from the media, but he didn't go and look and inform himself of what was actually going on? And again, you can't expect everyone to be researching everything. So I forgive that, and at least he did ask for the evidence, and he seems willing to accept it. But this is supposed to be someone that was propped up as, this was a big-time Democrat debater. He's a big-time left-wing debater. And he's the one who brought up the IRA. He's the one who brought up these Russian trolls. So you would think if you're bringing them up as an example of the terrible election interference, that you would at least been aware of the relevant fact that, actually Judge Dabney that looked into it said there is zero evidence that they were directed at the behest of Kremlin. They just happen to be 12 Russian people. Now, I'll play this next part and you can see what he says here.
So all we know is that, so the idea that this was at the behest of the Russian government, we don't know that at all. We don't have proof of that. We just have proof it was a Russian company. And I don't deny that this
Do you think
happened.
it's more likely to assume that just a random Russian company decided to set up shop in the United States under a fake name and then mislead Americans that worked with them into thinking they were working with fellow Americans to try to throw the election for a different candidate?
Well, what I think is most likely is irrelevant as to what actually happened and what can be proved. I mean, I also think what's most likely is probably, and this is just my opinion, they really didn't care if Trump or Hillary won. I think they assumed Hillary would win, and so they wanted to muddy up the waters, which is why they placed, that same internet research agency pushed all kinds of pro-Black Lives Matter stuff, pro-LGBT stuff. After the election, they were personally responsible for starting rallies against Trump, so they just wanted to mess with the system. But I'm glad that you bring that.
So, then he's like, well, don't you assume? But again, it's funny how this works this way. They want this appeal to authority all the time. I'm distrusting of the intel agencies and the establishment, and I'm constantly fighting against, well, we know Trump's guilty. We know Trump's corrupt because look how many people around him have been indicted. Well, we know Mueller was good because look how many people he's indicted. So this constant appeals to authority. But then when you can say, look, a judge specifically rebuked them for making this connection, then it's like, well, yeah, but what do you feel? Well, okay, what game are we playing here? My feelings irrelevant. The truth is that this was reported ad nauseum by the media for years as proof that the Kremlin attacked us. It was 50% of Mueller's accusations of the Kremlin attacking us. Yet that story turns out to not be true. We haven't been able to prove that. There's no proof of it whatsoever. And even after this judge's statement came out, it's crickets. The media hasn't said, oh, our bad. We reported that for 2 years and it turns out to not be true. It's nothing. Even Destiny hadn't heard this. So it just kind of further proves kind of the big story, the big picture that I'm talking about here about this establishment corruption. They're out to get Trump. That's what it's about. He says that all of that's a conspiracy theorist, but I think I'm showing him over and over. But wait a minute, here's evidence. This isn't disputed. This isn't hearsay. Here's actual admissions from Biden. Here's an admission from Lukashenko. Here's an actual judge who ruled this way. And this is all information that apparently he was unprivy to. So that kind of speaks to the fact that the mainstream narrative is coming from isn't exactly accurate. So maybe you shouldn't just be calling people conspiracy theorists that are looking into it more than you.
Not because this proves the actual contention is why we need to investigate all election interference. Because I will concede to you that if the hack did actually happen from Russia to the DNC and to Podesta's emails, that's a bigger deal than this IRA stuff. You would agree with that?
You don't believe the investigation right now that points to Guccifer being directed by Russian sources hacking into the DNC. You don't think that investigation was good or that was proven?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm assuming it was proven. I'm always skeptical anytime that I don't personally see proof, whether it's to benefit my side or not. For example, I was skeptical. I think the worst thing Trump's done in his administration was bombing Syria. Now I think we're seeing credible evidence that it turns out the chemical attack wasn't as it was seen. But I was skeptical of that information from the intel community. I'm not saying that it's wrong, though. I'll take them at word, and I'll say that to me is obvious. All I'm saying is that's a step beyond these Russian trolls, right? Like, I think we could agree with that. The idea of hacking Hillary or her campaign manager's email is a bigger deal to me than 12 Russian trolls posting memes.
Sure, I don't like how you phrased it the last thing. I think the last thing is still pretty troubling. But yeah, the hack and the hack is also something that was I think with more evidence was stated to have been directed by the Kremlin. If you read those indictment logs,
that is what they found. So that is a different.
And I'm just trying to be conciliatory towards him here. I'm saying, look, I can agree that the hack, if the hack happened, that is a big deal. That's a bigger deal. The Russian troll thing I thought was a joke from the get-go. So I'm just trying to be conciliatory to him and be like, look, yeah, I basically have presented evidence that this IRA Russian troll farm thing's a joke, but I will still give you the benefit of the doubt that, yeah, if the hack happened the way Mueller said, that's still a bigger deal. That's it. And even with that, it seemed to be some tension to even try to agree with him with some tension. But the only other thing I wanted to point out right here was, remember, again, him and his crowd's constantly accusing me of pivoting and whataboutism. How did we get where we're at here? We were talking about Ukrainian election interference, and somehow we keep talking about Russian trolls and the IRA and, Guccifer. It wasn't me that brought this stuff up. This was him trying to, I'm guessing, this is just me inferring, impugn my credibility by saying, oh, well, if you don't believe that this other stuff happened, then we shouldn't trust you here. But that is the definition of whataboutism. When I was talking, it wasn't whataboutism because it was directly material to what we're talking about impeaching Trump for. What he's saying here is my beliefs on Russia's hack or the Russian trolls somehow infers whether or not we should focus on Ukrainian election interference. And this was a mistake that we saw not a mistake, but an intentional misdirection that we saw from the Democratic witnesses on impeachment, where they constantly implied, we know who really interfered in the election. It was the Russians. Well, yeah, but two countries could interfere. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. So the fact that you want to say, oh, and if we talk about Ukrainian election interference, we're actually helping the Russians. I mean, that's a joke. That's what we see continually from these establishment types. Anytime you go against the policies we want or criticize the establishment, it's helping Russia or it's hurting our country. Remember, that's what CNN and all the places told us about investigating the FBI. How dare we investigate the FBI or criticize them? We're harming the country when we do that. Now we know that at least one FBI person actually changed evidence to spy on Trump's campaign. An unprecedented action in the history of this country. This was an action directed from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, and an FBI member under Bush been spying on Obama using fabricated evidence. You could damn well bet it would have been the biggest story in the country. But because it was Democrats doing it to Trump, no big deal. So the whataboutism isn't coming from me. I'm trying to focus on this Ukrainian election interference, and somehow he keeps taking it back to Guccifer and Russian trolls. But again, one of the criticisms of me that you could make in this debate was that I didn't push back on allowing him to change the topic so much. But it was his stream, and it was him being generous to me, having a far bigger platform, me having 500 subscribers to him having 200,000. So I felt that I owed somewhat of a niceness to kind of talk about what he wanted. And I did say in my email to him that we could discuss what he wanted. So I did think it was off topic. I tried to make note of that, but I think I tried to argue in good faith even when he changed the topic. I hope people agree with me.
Difference between what was going on with the IRA and what's going on with the hacks. They can directly tie the hacks to the Russian government. So yeah, I will agree with you. Now again, I stand that I'm skeptical and ready to hear counter evidence, but I'm operating on the assumption that Mueller is right and that is actually what happened. That's the assumption. And by the way, I'm by no means my Putin fan, and I think it is outrageous. If he hacked, I don't care if it was my candidate, a candidate that had nothing to do with an election, that's outrageous and should be investigated. But the reason I bring up the IRA point is, even with that, even with these Russian trolls, and no matter how severe, like, I'll admit that my bias is leading me probably to downplay what they did compared to what you would take on it. But the point is, this is proof that even Russian or even foreign interference of that level, of just releasing dirt, is worth investigating. We've been told it's a big deal and it led to indictments. So why would it be different all of a sudden in the Ukraine? Why would we allow Ukraine?
What is this Ukraine thing that we're talking about investigating? What are you referring to specifically now?
Sure. So, for example, we had a Financial Times August 2016 article where a parliamentarian named Sergei Lyshenko publicly admitted to working with the Anti-Corruption Network, which was set up with the help of the Obama administration. That's called the NABU. And what they did was they released this black ledger on details of Paul Manafort. And they released that. We now know through other articles that was in conjunction with a DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa. But you could leave her out of it for now. Just know that parliamentarians in the Ukraine admitted to interfering in the election, releasing dirt, and they did so because they expressly said, we hate Trump. We think that he will be someone who's more willing to talk to Russia. Almost 90% of our politicians are on board with Hillary. That's election interference. You might say, well, good, Manafort sucked, but it's still interference. No one said the interference is allowed if it's truthful.
People are saying that this same guy was fired for corruption and later retracted these claims. Is that true or not?
That's not.
So it's clear he doesn't really know about this. No, I did not get one new subscriber. In fact, I did not even mention my YouTube channel. I forgot to do it. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I was accused of trolling to be platform to get subscribers. So the fact that I didn't get a new subscriber, it's fine that I won the debate, but they said that I handled myself better than any conservative they've seen on his channel. So I guess I take that for what it's worth. That, I appreciate that. I appreciate that compliment. That means a lot to me when someone that even likes him thinks I did a good job. That's important to me. But so it's clear to me that he doesn't really know. And again, the only quibble I'll have, I don't judge him for not being briefed on all of the allegations, but the fact that he's willing to write it all off, it's just a crazy conspiracy. Hasn't this all been debunked? Like, you would think before you say something being debunked, you would do a little research on it. So he's like, he'll ask me over and over, wait, what are you saying the Ukrainians did? Now, one of the things Destiny's doing, and I don't begrudge this as well, is he's reading what his audience is saying as well. Hey, what's up, Michelle? He's reading what his audience is saying as well. And then he's kind of taking cues from them on things to say. So his audience makes a mistake of conflating two different Ukrainians. Those Ukrainians are Lyshenko, Leshchenko, who was the parliamentarian who admitted to working with the NABU, and we'll later find out a guy named Artem Sitnik, the head of the NABU. They worked together, admittedly, because they dislike Trump, to spread this information, this black ledger, to harm Trump's candidates. That's been a minute. They are saying, ignore all this. This is all garbage. This is what they're telling Destiny. That's all garbage. That guy was just a prosecutor who was found out to be corrupt and later recanted his story. No, now they're talking about Lutsenko, Lutsenko. Now, I only bring it up because it's funny, because the same audience is constantly telling me how wrong I am and how I'm misinformed and how much of a liar, but they're making a simple mistake, getting two people with similar names confused. And also, he didn't recant. That's a misnomer. Lutsenko said he was given a list of people to do not prosecute by Yovanovitch. He later clarified that basically it was a colloquialism. He wasn't physically handed a paper with a list of names. He was just told a list of names not to prosecute. So that's not recanting. The relevant information is still being defended by that person. And there's no evidence that he was corrupt. This is a common tactic that you see with the Democrats and with the people supporting the impeachment, because they have to assume anyone who isn't involved with their narrative must be corrupt. Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate it. I do think that that he was trying to change the subject and kind of do a word salad type of thing to try to confuse me. So I tried to keep on point, and I hope that I came off as polite and kind of doing a good job of it. So I do explain to them the difference between Leshchenko and Lutsenko here, which is what's going on.
If I could clear that up, that's not true. This person's name is a man by the name of Lesh.
Hold on, your mic, hold on, your mic is cutting out. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? This man's a man by the name of Leshchenko, Leshchenko.
Yep.
Lutsenko was a former prosecutor. That's someone that they're saying was corrupt. I have quibbles with that as well, but I'm not talking about Lutsenko. I'm talking about Leschenko. And if you look up Financial Times, it might be behind a paywall, but Financial Times, Leschenko, Leschenko, it'll come up and you can see his public admission. This is August.
Okay, wait, real quick. I just want to see real quick if these are actually two separate people.
Sure.
Because I haven't read anything. I really don't care about this impeachment stuff that much, but he's literally talking about Ukrainian officials talking shit about Trump. That's what he's referring to when he says there was interference in the election. So what exactly are we talking about when we talk about like election interference when it comes to this Ukraine stuff?
So
what he just said there was him reading one of the audience's comments. Now, I think if you've been listening here to this live stream, you've heard me specifically talk about the Black Ledger 2 times. Now, what this audience person's talking about, I do kind of sympathize with what they're saying. I do think that it was a mistake for the Republicans to focus on the fact that this ambassador to the Ukraine kind of came out and wrote an op-ed in The Hill questioning Trump's comments on Crimea. Now, I know that John Solomon has said that technically might violate the Geneva Convention, but if you watch the video I did on John Solomon's article on the 28 points that he had, even in that video I said, I don't think this is a big deal. I'm sorry, even if it's technically against the Geneva Convention, I really don't care that some ambassador wrote an op-ed and said, whoa, Trump, we don't like what you said about Crimea. I just don't care. I really don't. So what this user is trying to do is take that point, which I think they're correct on that point, and saying, look, he's just saying we should be upset because some ambassador talked crap on Trump. No. I agree that that's silly. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this Black Ledger. You know? Yeah, and I agree with you, Clearly Clever. He is open to hearing. Like, he did read the evidence I presented. He has said that he would bring me back, that he would look into it more. So I certainly debated worse people. You know, I do think he was incredibly generous to have me on. You know, of course I'm going to quibble about exactly with how the debate went. I'm sure he would do the same with me, but I'm trying, you know, I honestly don't think that I've talked trash on him. I've talked about where I think he's wrong with this debate, you know, but, you know, I said from the outset here, a lot of people that watched it thought that he was rude to me or, you know, things like that. It didn't bother me at all. It really didn't. I've debated people that are far worse than that and that. So, you know, that's part of the goal. You're never going to, someone who's I do think he's pretty well spoken. It seems like an intelligent person, but someone who's that vested in debating and arguing and really in a side like that, you're not going to totally convince them of your side in one argument. But maybe I made little inroads. Maybe he'll research on his own and he'll say, okay, some of what this guy's saying is true. I can kind of see that. So who knows, right? So yeah, I think you're right to point that out, Clearly Clever. So, okay, we'll go on here.
They've admitted to doing. You can check out a Politico 2017 article or the Financial Times 2016. What they've admitted to doing was there was an ongoing investigation into this guy Yakovlevich. And you said it would be bad for Trump to bring this up because he was connected to Manafort. You're right about that. There was connections between Manafort and the previous president Yakovlevich. There's an ongoing investigation into him in 2016. Parliamentarians and investigators decided to, while this investigation was ongoing, illegally leak that information to the United States. Now, there's good evidence they leaked it with the help of a DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa. But they publicly admitted to leaking this in August of 2016. That's official dirt as to official records they had. We now know that Mueller didn't even find that Black Ledger credible enough to use it in his indictments of Manafort. So it turns out it looks that it's highly skeptical that the dirt they released on Manafort was even true in the first place. But they publicly I'm not concerned. I agree with the audience that's bringing up. I thought the Republicans were absolutely stupid to bring up this point. Oh, well, some Ukrainian ambassador talked crap on Trump. Who cares? Trump probably deserves to have crap talked on him. And I don't have a problem with that at all. But actually releasing this evidence, which later turned out to not even be credible enough for Mueller to use for an indictment. That seems to be exactly what Trump was accused of working with a foreign government to get dirt.
Okay. I'll look into this because I honestly just don't care about the impeachment shit that much. I'll look into this, but yeah, I just don't know about the facts of the matter for this. So.
Okay, well, hey, that's fair. I really appreciate it. If there was one other thing, I think this shows something endemic.
So yeah, I mean, kind of speaking to your point there, Clearly Clever. Thanks, Kishki. Yeah, I think to your point there, I mean, he does say he'll look into it more, which is fair. Now, the one quibble I'll have is, you know, and it's a small thing, but before you say this has all been debunked, and he'll later call me a conspiracy theorist, and he laughs at me talking about the deep state. Again, we might not get into that part of the debate. You know, you might not want to quickly write all that stuff off and then admit like, well, admittedly, I don't know about this. You know, so that's just the one quibble I have with it. But I think you clearly hear him say, look, I wish he would have put this video up on his YouTube channel. It looks like that probably won't happen, but that's fine. That's his right. He doesn't have to. And I asked him beforehand if I could record and put a video up, and he said that would be fine. So that's great. But maybe he'll bring me back, and maybe he'll be more informed. Maybe he'll have facts that dispute the facts that I'm presenting. I have an open mind. I'm willing to hear it. So that's where we are there. Now, we're only going to go a little further with this because I also wanted to talk about the Russia collusion investigation. So we'll get to those parts.
That we see going on with these investigations, which is it seems that every time there's any kind of foreign interference that could have benefited the Democrats, that it seems that we brush that under the table. For example, what would you say was the biggest Russian interference into our election in 2016?
Probably the hacking of the DNC, but I don't care that much. I've never really cared that much about like impeachment stuff.
Okay, well, that's I guess would be a good vote. I would think that even more than that, though. You know that the dossier was sourced by Kremlin officials.
The dossier was sourced by Kremlin officials. I thought the dossier was originally worked on by, was it Christopher Steele?
Yes, and he had source A and source B. He admitted source A and source B are both Kremlin officials close to Putin. And
by the way, I might technically be wrong about that. I don't know if it was source A and source B, but the crux of what I'm saying is true, that most of the big claims that were made in the dossier. See, here's the problem with the dossier, and it's incredibly difficult to talk to people on the left that somehow are still trying to defend the dossier, because what they'll say is, well, there was a bunch of stuff in the dossier that was true. For example, the dossier talked about Russians trying to meddle, and we now know that was true. But the problem is the dossier made a bunch of claims that were publicly available at the time that it was presented. Like, for example, it was public knowledge that Carter Page was in Moscow speaking at a university. It was public knowledge that, some of the things that Russians had tried to do. So what they did was sprinkled in stuff that we knew there was public knowledge of, and then made these huge claims. Now, the fact that Carter Page, for example, spoke at a university in Moscow, that's nothing. Who cares? What's important is the claim that he was offered shares of a gas company called Rosneft to help steal the election with Trump, Russia, etc., right? Some kind of nefarious relationship. It turns out that there's no proof that that was true whatsoever. After 3 years of investigation, we can't verify any of that. So the idea, these serious claims that were made about Trump and his team illegally conspiring with the Russians, the sources for almost every one of those claims were Kremlin officials. That's according to Steele's own appendix and notes. I don't know if they were source A and source B. It might have been like source A and source D or something like that. But that is true. And it's amazing to me that after 3 years of investigation, and look, this isn't a small story. It's not like, oh, the Russia investigation, you'd hear a blip about that once a week on the mainstream media. I mean, this was the lead story almost every night on almost every network and almost every one of these major newspapers for years. And so the very beginning of this story, this dossier that was used as a FISA warrant to spy on people connected to Trump, the very beginnings of that story, like the fact you don't even know. I mean, I've been saying just at face value, look at the face value of this story, right? The face value is there is an accusation that Trump tried to get dirt from Russians on his opponent, Hillary Clinton, right? And so the way that the FBI is going about trying to prove that is by using dirt paid for by Hillary Clinton from Russians. Did you get that? Let me repeat that again. It would be bad if Trump got dirt on Hillary from Russians. So we'll try to prove that by Hillary getting dirt on Trump from Kremlin officials. I mean, that's from day one, that's been nonsense. I've known that Kremlin officials were the source of this from 2017. So again, it's frustrating that someone that's been so adamant about the removal of Trump, and you yourself heard him bring up Mueller before I did. So someone that was, clearly vested in the Mueller investigation doesn't know the simplest fact that the beginning of this actually started with Kremlin officials, right? And yeah, Kishke, you're right. Like, I don't know what he cares about. He keeps saying, I'll explain what happens in the latter 45 minutes of the debate at the end of this. But it seems this is something that I would see in debate a lot. This is going to sound really technical. For those of you that don't know, I was a collegiate debater. I was actually a pretty good one. I made it to the national debate tournament. as far as I know, is the first person from my university to ever make it. It's basically the NCAA basketball tournament of debate. There's no division, so you debate Harvard, you debate Cornell, Emory, all the big schools. The only difference is the NDT tournament takes 72 teams, but each school's allowed to send up to 3 teams. So you actually end up with basically like between 35 and 40 schools that go. So it was a really big deal for me and my partner at Clarion University, a small state school in rural Pennsylvania, to make it. I really busted my butt. But I just say it because I was a decent debater. The debate was incredibly left-wing. One of the things you would see a lot that would occur with people in debate is they would do what were called critiques. A critique is a philosophical objection to your plan, and most of the time it's centered on the fact that the U.S. government is illegitimate. So the topic would have something to do with the United States federal government should lower corn subsidies, right? And you'd say, yeah, we should lower corn subsidies by 10%. That would help the economy, blah, blah, blah. The response to that would be, you use the United States federal government. Here's a bunch of Michel Foucault or Heidegger or other postmodernists that show that there's no such thing as truth. The federal government's evil, so we should reject you. And you would say, oh, okay, you're saying reject, whatever it is, the federal government, reject capitalism, reject the patriarchy, reject whiteness. All of these were things you would hear. So you would say, well, what system are you defending? And they would say, oh, no, we're not defending a system. We're just rejecting yours. And that's kind of what I think, like, as I'm debating Destiny, like, even later when I'll ask them, like, okay, you don't like Trump, so who would you support? Well, I guess Bernie and Elizabeth, but I don't like any of their policies. Well, I don't care about impeachment, and I don't care about this, and I don't care about that, and Trump's just this really horrible person, and you're like, at one point he talks about it was horrible for Trump to take a picture with Kim Jong-un. And that was such a terrible thing. And so we start to talk about it a little, and he's like, I really don't care about this picture. And it's like, I didn't bring it up. You did. So he keeps bringing up these things and saying, but I don't care about it. I don't care about it. Which I guess is fair enough. He's welcome to care about whatever he wants. But yeah, it does become a question of exactly what's going on. But let's get through the rest of this, and then I'll talk about the end of it.
That's where all of the allegations about Carter Page being in Cohen being in Prague and Carter Page dealing with Russians to try to get gas shares in order to throw the election for Trump. That's where all of these accusations came from. We know for a fact the dossier was used to get a FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page, which in its own right is the biggest political scandal in the history of our country. That you used.
Okay, okay. Do we have anything non-impeachment shit to talk about? There are so many like crazy conspiracy theories regarding a lot of these claims that I have to go back and I did this stuff a long time ago, and man, dude, Republicans make up so much random shit when it comes to this. I have to go back and look all this shit up again, rather than just.
And I think it's a little unfair to lump me in with supposed Republican conspiracy theories. I mean, I didn't say anything there that's not just public knowledge. Like, we know that the dossier was admitted by Comey and by others, unverified at the time, that it was used to wiretap a Trump associate. That's true. We know that the source for that were Kremlin officials. The Democrat defense is it was okay for X, Y, and Z. But it's not under dispute that that's exactly what happened. It was unverified. It's still unverified to this day. Mueller didn't prosecute any of the crimes that were alleged in it. So, I mean, this isn't a conspiracy theory. You might say, I don't think it's as big of a deal as you, or I think it was warranted. But to just say, oh, no, I'm not going to listen to any of this because I've heard conspiracy theories before, I just feel that that's a little disingenuous of him. But it seems clear to me at this point, one of the reactions I've got for people that were kind of supporting me was that I left him change the subject. It seems obvious to me at this point that he's done talking about this. He doesn't want to talk about the Russia collusion stuff. He doesn't want to talk about impeachment. I don't know. It could literally be at face value. He just doesn't care about it, which is fine. It could be that he would like to research it more before he discusses it. Or it could be that he feels that it's not a winning issue for him. It's not an issue that he could sound good on, so he wants to change the subject. Either way, I felt that there's no sense keep, banging, pushing something that he's just going to say, look, if you keep talking about this, we'll just end the discussion out. So I do end up pretty quickly here changing the subject, but we'll finish up here.
kind of like let you spin like a really crazy narrative. I need to get the facts of the matter straight again if I want to go back and have these conversations.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Is there anything like impeachment related that so we don't have to rely on like all this like crazy fucking shit to have a conversation? Or?
Sure. I don't think that was necessarily impeachment. If I'll just summarize it here real quick. All I'm trying to say is that I don't think it's debatable. I think that it's just out there. It's public fact that the Kremlin officials were behind this. Why aren't we investigating the Kremlin officials that their dirt was so effective that it led to a 3-year investigation that affect our elections? Like, it seems that...
First of all, the investigations didn't affect our elections. Trump's already elected, so that's a false narrative.
What affected the 2018 election?
Maybe not. We don't know that.
Well, but wait, no, wait. Let me, in the interest of honesty, then. Well, we could say that Trump talking about Biden, that election's not for a year from now.
Well, we've never said that that's affected anything either.
Well,
you
but that's
that, like, in order for it, no, it doesn't have to be. A quid pro quo doesn't require that the outcome is successful. It doesn't require that a blackmail or an extortion or anything actually works. None of that is required for it to be a quid pro quo. Maybe it doesn't have any impact whatsoever. But like, regardless, like, if we want to talk about how upset we are that a potential investigation can affect an election, why were we so quiet when Hillary was constantly being bombarded with stuff related to Benghazi or emails? It seems like we never cared about it then, but now we.
But that's not true. Most of the left did speak up. He might be saying I specifically didn't speak up then. I actually did speak up that I thought it was wrong. What James Comey did was wrong. I think that Comey was absolutely wrong. The biggest sin Comey had was inserting himself as a prosecutor and inserting language about intent into the crime of mishandling classified information, because that language is not in there. We now later knew that they actually drew up a statement as to why they were going to exonerate or not charge Hillary, but then later had to change the language because they realized they used the word gross negligence, which is part of the criminal statute. So he literally added this idea of intent. We know that that's not there because, for example, we know I believe he was a naval or Marine or a Navy man who was charged because he took a picture for his family in his submarine. That wasn't intent. He wasn't intending to give away classified info. That was a mistake on his part, but still it was considered a crime. Well, we know the standard was different with Hillary. We know that. That was Comey's big sin. But I do agree with Destiny and with the left that Comey had no business giving that big speech saying, here's all the things that Hillary did that were kind of shady, but we're not going to charge her. That's not what investigators are supposed to do. And if you think, well, screw Hillary, I don't care that it happened to her, just put yourself in the position of, you're being investigated by a prosecutor and ultimately you're not charged. But the prosecutor still gets on national TV and says, in the course of our investigation, we found a bunch of crappy stuff this guy did. I mean, that's not good. And I did speak out at the time. I don't care that it possibly helped Trump. Now, Comey did it to help Hillary. That's what it was about. But I spoke up. So again, Destiny's speaking in generalities, and it's not his fault he doesn't know me, but that's not true. I did speak up. The Benghazi stuff was going on well before the election. So, I mean, that's whatever. But again, it's not me that's talking about these investigations affecting Hillary. Again, this is something I can't stress enough. I'm not the one. I'm starting on the position of what the Democrats are saying. Anyone who's watched this impeachment episode knows what's going on is the Democrats, even the witnesses are saying, oh, we're afraid that Trump was withholding this aid to help him against an opponent in the 2020 election. So I'm responding to that. And then Destiny's saying to me like, well, what are you talking about affect the elections? Well, clearly the investigation into Trump not only affected the 2018 election directly, but stymied his agenda the entire way through it. It's still continuing to affect public perception. And if that's the case, if Destiny's so worried about investigations affecting elections like he seems to be with Hillary, then why would he be okay with this impeachment investigation? It's transparently an effort to convince voters not to vote for Trump in 2020. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where he's going with this.
No, it's just like I don't know. I just don't care that much about the impeachment stuff. And if anything, if we look at the polling, like all the Republicans are emboldened anyways when this investigation type of shit happens. Like look at Kavanaugh. Like the support for Kavanaugh grew in the wake of those investigations. The support for Trump has actually grown after the testimonies of investigations are actually hurting Trump.
Oh, you still there? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Sorry. Hello. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, no problem. No, I agree with you, but I'm not the one who was starting on the position of, we should avoid investigations because they'll interfere with the election. That is an argument that the Democrats are making. I understand your more nuanced argument is that process.
I thought the argument that the Democrats are making right now is that there's just an investigation to see if Trump withheld foreign aid in exchange for favors from Ukraine against political opponents. It doesn't have to do with election interference.
Oh, no.
It might be a byproduct, but
No, if you listen to Schiff, all of their narrative coming out, it's not about they know they can't argue about the process or they'll be hypocrites because they know that the Obama administration also used a quid pro quo. So their specific argument is Trump did this in order to go against his biggest opponent in the 2020 election. This was to benefit Trump in the 2020 election. In fact, they specifically had many witnesses say they presumed that's what this was about, was helping Trump in the 2020 election. So I do respect that your position's more nuanced.
I don't know if
That was a
that's
good
the
try
main
on my
point.
part, though, right?
It took a long time for Pelosi to come around on impeachment here.
Right.
So, but okay. All right. Well, hey, listen. Yep. I'll if we want, we can chat at like a later date about this, and I'll start doing all my reading right now so that I can get a hold on this. But man, what a waste of time. I don't know why like so much time is spent on the impeachment stuff. Like it's a legal process. Like it has to happen. It'll go down its route, or not a legal process, but a legal/political process. It'll go down its route. I don't know. It's just not something that interests me that much. But
That's fair enough. If you don't mind me asking, if I could.
Okay, and that's basically it on the parts that I'm going to play here today. Now, I will talk about, there's still 45 minutes left of this debate going, which feel free to check out if you like. I'm not playing it because I feel that I lost the second half of the debate or something like that. I think the second half of the debate's not really a debate. It's kind of just, it meanders a bit. It's basically just him asking me why I support Trump. And when I give him my reasons, he says, so other than your crazy conspiracy theory stuff, well, that's my big reason. So we'll talk specifically about it. But, if you're not interested in hearing that and you wanted to tune out, I wouldn't blame you. I will briefly talk about it. But yeah, so just to end this first half of what was going on in this debate, some good and some bad, I think, comes out of it. The bad is I think that it's another example of I really, really, really want to have a serious discussion with someone who disagrees with me on the facts of whether or not there should be an investigation into Biden and 2016 Ukrainian election interference. It's a struggle to me that no one seems, I don't know if it's they're not capable or that they're uninterested in having that discussion. They just want to say it's all irrelevant or it's all a conspiracy theory. And I think that that's unfortunate. That it's okay, to disagree, but to just lump everything. I mean, to me, that would be just as bad if a Trump supporter just being like, oh, the Democrats are always corrupt. We won't listen to anything they ever say negative about Trump. Like, that wouldn't be a good position to be in either. And the Democrats would rightfully call that out. So, I was disappointed in that. I was disappointed in, I guess, the audience to some degree that he had. But again, 4,000 people watching, maybe 30 people commented. So, I wasn't disappointed in the fact that it got to me like personal attacks or anything. I don't really care about that. And some of the jokes I actually thought were funny. I was getting a lot of jokes about my voice. But it's not the individuals I'm disappointed in. The thing that disappoints me is that, let me put it this way. I thought I handled myself well in this debate, and I think that I'm biased, but my most objective take is I thought that I had a better handling of what we were discussing in this portion of the debate. That's just as best objective I could be, though I understand that I'm biased. But I wouldn't make the hyperbolic claim like, I destroyed him. He didn't know what he was talking about at all. He was pathetic. He was a troll. Like, I wouldn't say any of that. And that was what a lot of people were saying to the reverse about me. So it's not that my feelings are hurt or I'm upset about that. It's just that it's another example of how, partisanship can affect people so much that they could see something. I could totally respect if someone was like, yeah, I thought Destiny got the better of Rob in that portion of the debate. I can respect that. I might disagree, but fair enough. But I think it's just objectively untrue to say that I'm a total conspiracy theorist liar or a troll or, I got destroyed and didn't even have one good point. That seems a bit much. That's all I'm saying. Some of the good that came from it, it was nice to finally, again, I can't speak highly enough of him giving me an opportunity to be on his channel because he has such a bigger platform. I also think even regardless of what you think of him, if you don't think that he had a good handle on these facts and stuff, it is difficult to just kind of accept any comer that wants to talk about what they want. I mean, so hats off to him for that. That's kind of what he tries to do on some of his channel. So I appreciate that as well. And, I told him up front I didn't mind jokes and stuff and him getting heated. So I didn't have a problem with any of that. And I also think that, if I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's being honest there, that he would like to have me back for a conversation and he'll look into this more. That's good. That's all you want from people, leave them, give you a voice, and then give a good faith effort of like, okay, I'll look into what you're saying. If that's what occurred, that's reasonable. So, if Destiny or any of his fans are watching this in retrospect, don't mistake my criticisms of what I've been talking about in this video for saying that I think he's a crappy person or something like that, or, that he was unethical. I'm not saying that at all. So, now can he be heated and stuff like that? Sure. It's not my thing. Now, I tried, my goal was, and I partially thank Kishki for this. I thought I did a debate recently where it started off with a bunch of ad hom attacks that kind of went on for 2 days. And I question whether it was worth me doing that debate because I think it makes me come off sounding like I normally don't sound. I do get heated if you watch my videos, but I think that if you watch any time I've debated people, and most of the debates I've had on here, probably 8 to 9, are with people that disagree with me. And I think that I'm usually pretty fair and I'm not calling names and stuff like that. So I thought that I hope that I came across that way. I tried to be polite. So I hope that came across. So that's kind of what I had to say about that portion of the debate. If I had to give my, objective, I guess I already kind of said this, but I felt that I handled myself well, especially in that first portion of the debate. Now, the second portion of the debate, and I'll just talk about it briefly. I'm not going to play the audio. By all means, it's up on my channel. You can check it out. I intentionally didn't write much in the description about this debate when I put it up on YouTube because I'd like people to form their own opinions. This video, obviously, I'm kind of giving my opinion on it, but by all means, if you disagree with my take on that debate, that's entirely fair. I mean, that's human nature. People could disagree, but I just wanted to give my explanation of my reaction of what I thought was going on. What the second part of the debate becomes is I did ask him. It starts with me asking who his preferred candidates were. He says, I don't really know. Bernie and Elizabeth, I guess. And then he asked me why I support Trump. And it becomes meandering because it's like two ships passing, because you've heard me say on this channel over and over again, the reason that I voted for Trump was my dream election in 2016 was Trump versus Bernie, because I thought at the time that both of them were perceived as outsiders by the establishment. Bernie got screwed in the primary. I think they miscalculated and had hubris and assumed that Hillary would easily defeat Trump. The reason I wanted Trump to win was because I felt that the mere fact that he was elected would prove to be our biggest chance to out the corruption with the establishment. Call it the deep state, the establishment, whatever. That doesn't just mean the Democratic Party. There are also establishment people on the right, the Republican Party as well. It's also not just politicians. It's like corporate interests that kind of bankroll a lot of these politicians. It's unelected bureaucrats, things like that. I thought that there was corruption there. I think that Trump has accomplished that goal. And I tell Destiny, it's not that I'm saying like I follow Q or that I think Trump's constantly playing 4D chess. The mere fact that Trump won was considered a threat to these people that have the established power. And so they've outed themselves unlike any before. For example, we now publicly know that they, which seems unprecedented in U.S. history, used unverified opposition research to spy on someone connected to Trump's campaign. We know there's been unprecedented leaks. We see that in no time in history do we see almost every leader of the major intel agencies under the previous administration are now publicly admonishing the current president on mainstream news networks. We see the media is 95% anti-Trump. We see the academia is the same way. We see the censoring of conservative voices of things. Everything's been put into overdrive. And I think this is a unique time to where we can actually strike back, not physically or anything like that, but with this corruption outed. See, because the end game of these establishment people, they always know the bureaucrats are there forever. A politician's there 4 to 8 years. But the bureaucrats in the State Department, the FBI, the intel agencies, the corporate people that are backing them, the globalists, whatever, all of these groups, they're there. They can play the long game. So it's the boiling frog theory, right? The boiling pot, where if they just turn up the heat slowly, people accept it. But Trump was like a shock to the system, and hopefully it could wake people up. That's exactly why I voted for Trump. The media's outed themselves as corrupt, etc. So I kind of explained that, and basically he's like, that's all conspiracy theory mumbo jumbo. Okay, well, now that's my big reason for voting for Trump, though. You might disagree with it. You might say that he sucks. That's fair enough. That's your opinion. But that's my reasoning. And then he says, what specifically foreign policy-wise? Now, I think one of the things that I already said, was I was trying to approach this debate understanding who the vast majority of the audience would be, and that were people that dislike Trump and people that are probably leftists. And so I made concessions. I said, look, there are things Trump did that I don't like. I didn't like him bombing Syria. I don't like the deficit spending. I don't like when he said, oh, we'll pull out of Syria, but then we're going to leave troops for the gas wells. I don't like that. I don't. And I think that Destiny and his audience, then their take on it was like, well, then I'm some kind of hypocrite because I have no reason to defend Trump. No, I already told you my major reason for defending Trump, and you just choose to say, I don't care about that. So, and the same with domestic policies. Like I kind of said, with the deficit. No, I did. I said there were things like I did appreciate Trump trying to pull out troops out. I appreciated the tax cut, though I think that it's a mistake if we don't also cut spending, which is something that needs to happen. And I talked about how, the problem is Republicans always want to lower taxes but not decrease spending, and Democrats always want to increase spending but not increase taxes. So they're both kind of guilty of this. And what I was getting from kind of the vibe of Destiny and from his audience was, oh, so you have no defense of Trump. You have no defense of Trump. And I was also trying to say, look, it's not just Trump in a vacuum, right? I mean, there are plenty of things. There are plenty of things I wish Trump would do better. But it's not him in a vacuum. It's Trump or who? Who am I going to vote for instead? Most of my criticisms with Trump would be done far worse. Like, for example, deficit spending. So what? I'm going to vote for a Democrat who supports the Green New Deal? Or like foreign regime change wars? Yeah, like I didn't like Trump bombing Syria. But what? I'm going to vote for some anti-Russia hawk in the Democratic Party? I mean, the only one who doesn't seem to be a total hawk in the Democratic Party is Tulsi. And she's nuts in other ways. So it's not that I don't have a defense of Trump. And I think that, I didn't get a chance. I would love to be able to talk to him just like in a non-debate context and be like, look, I think you're mistaking me for someone who's like, oh, I'm going to defend everything Trump does. That's not who I am. And I think there's a lot of people that vote for Trump that aren't like that. A lot of people I know that support Trump, they're like, look, he does things I don't like. But I prefer him. And I think that he's showing something. He actually seeks to kind of care about the average person in this country. I do believe that. You might not think those, and this is something I caution Republicans on as well. It's very difficult. You could disagree with, when I was running for Congress, AOC was taking off, and people wanted to talk about AOC. And I can't believe how stupid these people that vote for AOC, these stupid millennials and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, now, wait a minute. Hold up on that, right? I said, don't insult the voters. Oh, why? I'm like, well, look, you're a Republican, right? You want the Republican Party to win, right? Yeah. I said, okay. Did you like it when Hillary called you deplorable? Or when they say you're uneducated or you're in flyover country? Nah. Would you ever vote for her? Of course not. Okay. What do you think you're going to convince people that voted for AOC to vote Republican if you're insulting them? I mean, it's okay to speak up against AOC. That's fine. But most people have a reason to vote, right? You might disagree with that reason. You might think they're being misled. That's fine. You can have that discussion. But when you just straight up insult the voters, I think that's a problem. So I have no problem with Destiny or his audience saying, we think your priorities and why you're voting for Trump are misplaced. That's reasonable. That's a reasonable discussion to have. But I don't think that that's not me having a good reason to vote for Trump. And basically what I was being accused of was voting for Trump to own the lefties. But that's not it at all. I fully admitted that I'm basically voting for Trump to own the establishment, and the establishment is part Republican. Now, how does that apply to? Right, I agree with you, Kishki. Right, I know, and I can't make this clear enough. I don't think that I will ever defend a politician or a party, no matter what. I don't see myself ever doing that. And here's why. I think that all of us that try to honestly think for ourselves, understand if you're really honest, you will never find a person in this world that totally agrees with you. Not just on politics, with anything. Your taste in music, your taste in food, your political beliefs, your philosophical beliefs, your religious beliefs. We're all unique individuals. So it would go to show that if that's true, you're never going to find a political party that constantly agrees with you. And you're never going to find a politician that constantly agrees with you. So while the party is doing things that I like, I'll support them. While the politician's doing things I like, I'll support them. When they're doing things I don't like, I won't support them. Look, this personally cost me in the election I ran for. I know, in being in the most conservative district in Pennsylvania, I know that the easiest position to take on gay marriage and abortion would have been totally pro-life and against gay marriage. But I did not take those positions. My abortion policy is very nuanced. I'm basically probably okay with abortions up until like 6 or 8 weeks. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I think it's a wedge issue that's used to divide us. It's not something I talk about often. But it would have been easy for me to just been like life begins at conception. I still consider myself pro-life, by the way. Nonetheless, just, I knew that it would have been easy, politically expedient for me to just say, oh, yeah, life begins at conception and no gay marriage. Gay marriage I don't care. I kind of think the government shouldn't be involved in marriage. If they are going to be involved in sanctioning marriage, then I see no credible reason why two consenting adults shouldn't be allowed to get married. Now, everyone might not agree with me. That's fine. But it just goes to show I'm not going to go along just to get along. I have my beliefs. That's just, that's the way it is. I'm open to a discussion about any of that. But I think that he's confusing. And like you said, because he's kind of a straw man that, all Trump supporters are these types of people. They're all racist. They don't like immigrants. That's not true either. I love immigrants. Some of the best Americans I know are immigrants. But they're legal immigrants. I also don't begrudge the specific illegal immigrant at all. I just think that our government's responsibility and duty is to the legal citizens of this country. And part of that means having a secure border. And that the more illegal immigration we bring in, the more it harms the most vulnerable of our citizens that our government should be looking out for. That's it. That doesn't mean I wish any ill will on these illegals. So I don't like kind of getting pigeonholed as, I'm some kind of stereotypical Trump-supporting monster, racist or something. That's just not who I am. Now, to talk about more of the specific things, I thought this kind of turnabout's fair play. So he supports Bernie and Elizabeth. So one of the issues that gets brought up, it's funny because I feel like oftentimes he was taking the more conservative position than me, or at least traditionally conservative position, which is funny. He was supposed to be kind of a big debate champion for the left. So, for example, he said, what do you mean when you're talking about the establishment? And I was like, well, look, the establishment seems to always agree in both sides on the big issues, right? So the Republicans and Democrats will quibble about abortion or gay rights or, this or that and the other. But when it comes to illegal immigration, neither have done crap. When it comes to bailing out the bankers, they were both on board with that. When it comes to the foreign regime change wars, they're both on board with that. And he was like, well, bailing out bankers, that was a good thing. It was a good thing that Obama bailed out the bankers. And I'm not going to get into the whole discussion, but I was like, nah, I disagree. I feel like we had to take our medicine. And he's like, no, Dodd-Frank would have solved it and Trump rolled it back. Which, I'll admit that I don't know enough about Dodd-Frank to take a stance on it one way or the other. I will say that I oftentimes find people will just say the name of a ruling or a law as somehow that's an answer to something. But sometimes it's like, well, but can you tell me specifically what about that law would have changed things? So, I don't know. But I don't know the specific law that well. I'm more familiar with Glass-Steagall, which, was repealed long before Obama. Anyways, so I said, yeah, I'm not going to argue about this law under a position of ignorance. But his take was we should bail out the bankers. I was like, that's kind of funny. That's more of a kind of corporatist mindset that you would traditionally associate with the right, not the left. The left would seem to be more progressive. Anyways, he's like, don't you understand that if we didn't bail out the banks, that it would have led to the total destruction of our economy? And I was like, okay. And he's like, every economist thinks that. Every credible economist thinks that. And I said, do you think Bernie thinks that? And he was like, no. And I said, do you think Elizabeth Warren thinks that? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, so you're supporting two candidates that you're admitting their economic positions would basically destroy the country. And he's like, well, they probably won't get to pass their economic positions. And, I don't really care about their economic positions. I was like, okay, so then their foreign policy? No. And I was like, okay, well, what is it about them? And he just says I just feel like the country's moved too far to the right, so I want people further to the left of me. Maybe they'll appoint some left judges. Now, for me being accused of only voting for Trump to own the libs, like it sounds like he basically literally just said, I just vaguely think the country's too far right, so I'll vote for people who I totally disagree with all their policies just to kind of stick it to those people. I mean, and he can vote for how he wants, that's fine, but it just seems funny that he was very interested in pinning me down on, I have to have like a voracious defense of the actual policies that Trump's done in order to justify my support of him, where he could then basically say, yeah, I have no good reason for voting for who I'm voting for. I mean, and that was basically in a nutshell what the second half was. And there were other things like, we were talking about the economy. He goes through this talking point, and I've seen other left-wing people go through it often. David Pakman, I just saw a video on this. It just blows my mind. And he did a video that CNN did where they talked to 6 women voters who were going to vote for Trump. And I wish I had the video in front of me now, but it's late. I'm not going to look it up. But you could look it up yourself. CNN has a little clip of it. I think you could probably find on YouTube. And so they're interviewing these 8 women, and they're like, why are you going to vote for Trump, in lieu of this, this, and this? Or why did you vote for him? Or why didn't you vote for him and now you are, etc. These were, quote, uneducated white women voters. So they didn't have college degrees. I'm not going to get into it does seem like it's a little ridiculous. Oftentimes when you're talking about Republicans, they'll talk about uneducated white voters. If you would speak to uneducated black voters voting a certain way, there'd be hell to pay. But nonetheless, whatever. I don't mind. He wants to talk about uneducated white workers. Anyways, what he says is what these women start to say is all kinds of things. And one of them talks about the tax bailout. And David Pakman says, see, I'm not saying that if you're uneducated, that means you're a crappy person, which is fine. And I'm glad he would say something like that. You could still be a person of value. I'm not even saying it makes you a dumber person, but maybe if you don't have a college education, you're more likely to fall for propaganda like you got more money back as a result of the tax cuts. And he said, what people don't understand is it's a linguistic trick that, yes, you got more money every week, but your refund was less. Well, actually, David Pakman's absolutely wrong, as even left-wing outlets like the New York Times has admitted. 60% of Americans actually got more money back. That's total. That's money you got to keep in your paycheck plus your refund, right? It's the left that's seeking to say that we're making the point, oh, your refund was smaller this year. It proves the tax cut didn't help. Well, yeah, that's because you kept more money of your paycheck every month, every week when you were getting paid, right? But David Pakman's switching that around, and he's saying, oh, no. Actually, it's these uneducated people are falling for the lie. But the statistics are quite clear. 60% of people received more money back. 9% of people received less, and the rest received roughly the same, give or take a little. So Pakman was wrong, and he's talking about kind of this idea, and it's just a bailout to the rich is what they said. And you see this mentality over and over with left-wing media and with the Democrats. It was a bailout to the rich. It was a bailout to the rich. And they ignore that actually most people did get more money back. So we started talking about the bailouts. We started talking about the tax cuts. And he was, telling me how bad it was and how it was a bailout for rich people, and majority, you could have, structured the tax cuts to give more money back to the poor. And I was like, yeah, I guess, but I feel like, and he kept saying Trump wasn't responsible for the job growth. He made the claim that the recovery under Obama was booming. I was like, I don't know about that. You could say there are mitigating factors, but most factors, whether you're looking at GDP, job growth, wage growth, most show that it was the slowest recovery from a recession that we've ever had. Now, again, you could say, but there were mitigating factors and Obama did a good job. That's fine. We can have that discussion. But to make the bold claim it was an explosive growth just doesn't seem to be backed up by the evidence to me. And anyways, this is I'm meandering here, but here's the point I'm getting to. And this is the kind of stuff that I'm trying to talk about. I finally say, okay, fine. You don't think Trump or the tax cut had anything to do with the impressive job growth that we've seen, which, by the way, primarily has been with communities of color that struggled with job growth under the Obama recovery, right? So, yeah, I'll get to that. You're right. So I said that. So if that's the case, if it wasn't because of Trump or it wasn't the tax cut, why do you think that we've had job growth under the Obama administration or Trump administration? And he says to me almost verbatim, he's like, it's globalism, baby. Because here's what it is. The less you interfere, the less the government interferes in the economy, the better it will do. And I'm like, dude, you just gave the argument for tax cuts. That's exactly what tax cuts are. That's exactly the conservative position. The conservative position is leave people keep more of their money, which means tax cuts, and the economy will do better. That's what I've been saying. The tax cuts had to do with job creation. And then he's like, well, we need some interference. Now, the point is, he's, and I do this, I'm guilty of this as well sometimes. You get invested in the heat of an argument and you don't understand that somehow the grander picture, if you step outside and you're seeing the forest for the trees, that you just directly contradicted yourself. So you're going to vote for Bernie and Elizabeth, who basically want to micromanage every aspect of the economy, as opposed to Trump, who basically had more of a hands-off approach. Now, he has a problem with the tariffs, which is more of an interventionist thing. But other than that, so, I mean, it just, and, then there were other questions, like on foreign policy. Like, he had a huge problem with Trump sitting down with Kim Jong-un and taking a picture with him. That was damning it gave Kim Jong-un a platform, and it damaged us incredibly. But at the same time, he was perfectly fine with Obama and the Iran situation, because we were actually going to get stuff back from the Iran deal. I don't know if that's true or not, but okay, let's say that's true. And we didn't get anything from Kim Jong-un. But what did we give up? With the Iran deal, we gave up billions of dollars. Yes, Destiny's point is we owed them that money anyways. We unfroze assets, whatever. We gave them the money. John Kerry admitted they knew some of that was going to go to Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization. What did Trump give up? A photo? I just don't get it. And it just seems like these, these are talking points, and I hate to say that because I hate when people do it to me, but it's just I don't get what the relevance of this photo is. And do you see how those two arguments sort of contradict? Because the idea is, and I applaud both Obama and Trump for this in theory, I do think that we should have our executive branch sit down and try to negotiate with our enemies. If I was president, my policy would be like the Theodore Roosevelt. Walk softly but carry a big stick. I would say we're open to negotiation. We don't want to use our military ever if it's up to us. We're open to negotiations, of course. But if you cross that line and we do have to use the military, it will be so severe that you will never consider doing it again. There's not going to be a bomb here, a bomb there. If we have to go, we're going to go. But up until that point, we're all for negotiation and diplomacy. So I don't have a problem with the president sitting down with that. I honestly didn't have a problem with Obama doing it with Iran. I didn't like the Iran deal, but that was more of the actual sending of money and what we got in exchange for it. But now we see Destiny and so many people on the left, it's like, well, Trump's a horrible maniac for wanting to sit down with Kim Jong-un. Now, I know for a fact if Obama would have sat down with Kim Jong-un, they would have never said that. The same media outlets, by the way, that are saying, oh, this was a huge photo op for Kim Jong-un. Remember when the Olympics were going on and they kept showing this woman, it was like an attractive woman from North Korea. I don't know if she was Kim Jong-un's wife or relative. She had something to do with the government, and they were like, oh, look how impressive this woman is, and blah, 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 blah. How isn't that legitimizing North Korea? I mean, it's just this garbage double standard. That's all I'm saying. And I just don't if you're, I understand he was controlling the conversation, which again, it's his channel, it's fine. But I could turn the question, if the question of why do you like Trump, why do you hate him? Let's assume you're an Obama voter. What has Trump done that makes you despise him? The first answer you'll probably get is kids in cages. Okay, we just saw the story that Reuters and the AFP retracted 2 weeks ago, that a UN study showed that the U.S. had a higher percentage of child detained captives than any other first world country, which, the Democratic War Room Twitter account put out. This is because Stephen Miller's a racist. He's in the Trump campaign. Trump hates brown babies, brown kids. That was their take on it. So it sounds, the UN said that. It sounds impressive, right? It sounds really sad that Trump would do that. Oops, I'm sorry. Those numbers were from 2015 under Obama. I'm sick and tired of this virtue. So what did they do? What did Reuters and the AFP do? They retracted the story. So what? Those kids in cages didn't matter in 2015? If you're really concerned about kids in cages, you wouldn't have removed the story. You'd have said, yes, sorry, we got the date mixed up. This was about Obama, but still very troubling. But they didn't say that, did they? Over and over, they'll put out a picture of a kid in a cage. Oh, sorry, that was under Obama administration. I mean, this constantly happens. It's clear that they don't care about the kids in cages, or if they do, they were willing to overlook it when their guy was doing it. So kids in cages is one answer, whatever. Other than that, I mean, Trump's a racist. If Trump's a racist, he's a very poor one. The black community is doing better under Trump than they did under Obama. So is the Hispanic community. Trump passed the criminal justice reform bill that was a dream of the Democrats. Couldn't get done under Obama. Trump did it. So you just don't like his word? Yeah. Foreign policy. Yes, maybe you don't like the fact that he's dropped bombs. I think there's a difference between regime change wars and fighting ISIS and al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. I do think there's a difference for those things. But okay, if you don't like the bombs dropped by Trump, fair enough. What'd you say about Obama? Who are you going to vote for in the Democrats that's any different? Maybe Tulsi Gabbard. Other than that, are we involved in any new military conflagrations? Nope. We were under Obama. Destiny said he doesn't like that he treats our allies rough. Why? I don't care. People act like, it's the job of the president. I saw a post on ATS about this today. Trump looks like a fool to the rest of the world. I don't care in the least bit. To me, it's like good cop, bad cop. Obama couldn't help but capitulate to the rest of the world. Now the new guy comes in and says, I don't care. The next guy might have a different tactic. In part of my discussion with Destiny, I said, he said, well, the respect of, places like NATO and our obligations to them, that stuff's important. I said, where is the respect if none of the countries are meeting the obligations they signed on to? If you're a landlord and your tenant continually doesn't pay you the rent he owes, he doesn't respect you. At some point, you have to say, listen, tenant, you got to pay up. If you keep saying, oh, it's cool, you're a great person, that's not respect. They like you because you're giving them stuff. That was the situation under Obama. At least that's my take. I don't feel like the UK or, Merkel or Macron or whoever, I don't feel like they respected us. If they did, they would be paying their fair share. But they weren't. Now, the idea of, our alliances will fall apart. Do you really think then that if China, for whatever reason, would attack the United States, that the UK and France and Germany, they're going to be like, Trump's so boorish that we're not going to fulfill our obligations under our alliances? And let's be honest, the majority of the opposition to Trump is, I don't like him because he seems like a rude guy. He's a big mouth. And the media tells me he's the devil. That's it. That's the majority of the opposition. Policy-wise, Destiny doesn't like his tariffs. Okay, but he admits Warren and Bernie are for the tariffs. And again, like the poster saying there, it's not in a vacuum, right? It's not like I don't like Trump, so we shouldn't have a president. It's I don't like Trump, so I'm going to vote for someone else. So if your problem's tariffs, and so you want to vote in like a super pro-unionist person like Elizabeth or Bernie, guess what they're going to do? Tariffs. If your problem's dropping bombs, so you're going to vote in a Democrat that wants to increase hostilities towards Russia, guess what's going to happen? Conflict in Syria is going to increase. That's what I don't get. Like the entire debate was focused on me having to justify. And again, like I said, I tried to justify my number one reason of voting, and I was just told, well, I don't think that's a good reason, which is fair. That's fine. But, you know, I wanted to show, and I think it's important to show that it's okay to criticize the person you support or your party. You know, I don't think Destiny did that as well. I think that, you know, it seems to me to be a tactic designed for winning an argument to say, well, I don't really support anything. You know, like, you know, it'll be like, you know, like you'll have this debate with a lot of left-leaning people. They'll be like, the United States is a terrible country. It's horrible. Here's some of the terrible things you've done. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, do you have an example of a country that's done things the right way? No. I'm not defending any particular country. I'm just saying how bad the United States is. And it's like, okay, that's fine. You can do that. And sometimes there is value in just pointing out how bad something is. But most of the time, if we're actually designing on making real world changes to make the world a better place, you don't just criticize, you criticize and then offer a solution. You know, and so if I just say, you know, that's why there's a lot of people that I kind of think it's old hat where they'll just say, both sides are corrupt. They're all corrupt. And no one will ever be elected that's not corrupt. So there's no sense even talking about any of this. Everybody's corrupt. That's it. End of discussion. I'm not voting for anyone. It's all corrupt. The whole system's corrupt. It's like, okay, that very well may be true. But then why even involve yourself in the conversation? Like, okay, so you're a nihilist. Nothing will ever get better. No sense trying to make it better. Fair enough. Thanks for your input. Moving on, right? Like, it just seems like, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right about Obama. You know, Obama came from the cultural Marxist point of view that America is the oppressor and the rest of the world were the oppressed. And therefore, he needed to apologize. And let's not kid ourselves. Trump and all of the past presidents, at least in my lifetime, whether Republican or Democrat, have talked and sat down and dealt with terrible world leaders. People in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Yemen, or right? Like, you know what I mean? By no means is it unique. So it was cool, you know, when Obama was, Obama, he made fun of the idea that Russia was our enemy. He said, oh, I'll have more flexibility after the election. You know, he was dealing with the people in Saudi Arabia. They're terrible people. That was okay, according to them. But taking a photo with Kim Jong-un, that's beyond the pale. I mean, come on. It just seems like a joke. So I'm getting a little tired here, so I'll probably head to bed soon. But yeah, I mean, if you want to watch that second half of the debate, I am worried that I will be accused of, you didn't go through the second half of the debate because you feel that that's where Destiny had his strongest points. And to be totally honest, I do think that Destiny was stronger in the second part because I think there is some truth to what he said, that he's more interested in that type of stuff. But to me, that's not really a debate. Who do you like and why? You know, like, if I were to ask you, what's your favorite baseball team? Oh, you like the Yankees? Why? Oh, I like the tradition, and I like their current players, and I really like their manager. I like the Steinbrenners that own it. I don't think those reasons are important. It's not really a debate. That's just asking personal preferences. And yeah, there were a couple of factual things that we discussed, but you know, to me, that was more of just having a conversation, which was totally fine. I didn't mind it at all. But I'm just trying to impress. I didn't leave that part off because I didn't want people to watch it. I hope people do watch it. I really do. And I hope you watch it with an open mind and understand that, I do think that Destiny was making some decent points. I think you'll see I agree with him a lot of what we're saying in that second half of the debate. He'll say specifically, do you think it's a good idea that Trump said we'll keep this oil in Syria? I said, no, I think it's a terrible idea. Do you think this deficit spending is a good idea? No, terrible. You're right. Oh, so then why would you support Trump? Well, I told you why. I think he's better than the other people. And I think that the idea of fighting corruption's the biggest thing in our country at this point. So, you know, so check it out. So, like, in conclusion, I hope that he'll invite me back. I wish he would put the video up on his channel. Why did I do this debate? Several reasons. If you watch the intro to my channel, which is, I need to update, but, so if you go to my channel, the kind of introduction to my channel video, I say, let me see if I get this right. I say there's basically 3 reasons that I do this video. One is or a couple reasons that I have for the channel. One is to give voices to people that normally don't, and I need to get better at that. So, like, all the people I'm close to in my life, most of them aren't involved in politics in any way whatsoever. Most of them are welders, farmers, truck drivers, police officers, bartenders, carpenters, bank tellers, right? No one in my circle of friends and family is what you would call a wealthy person. Maybe some would maybe hit the mark for middle class, but I live in rural Pennsylvania. These are the people I respect. They think that politics doesn't affect their life, but it does. And they have value. Their voice should be heard. Just because they might not know this law, like my father-in-law is a truck driver. I mean, it'll blow your mind to listen to the regulations that he has to deal with, and the troubles that bureaucracy has put upon his job. I would love to get him on this channel. I really would. But that was the first thing. But the other thing was I wanted to show that it's possible to have reasonable disagreements with people and still be friends, still have great conversation, right? Clearly Clever, I work in home health care. I do block shifts at people with developmental disabilities homes and take care of them. So I have a master's degree in speech communication. At some point, I might be a professor. I wonder if my YouTube channel hurts me in that field, but I don't care. That's one of the reasons I consider not using my real name. But I've never made more than $15 an hour in my entire life. And that's one of the things. Also, stripper escort, yes. That's one of the things, I ran for Congress. I mean, I probably spent $4,000 to $5,000. I refused to take any donation whatsoever, which I think some people could back up. I was actually offered some monies, and I said, no, won't take any. So I'm still paying off credit cards for my failed congressional run. But I think it's important that regular people get involved, and I think it's important that we show we could disagree and still have a civil conversation. So I hope that came across in this debate with Destiny. I hope, there is a part of me that hopes that it would increase my subscribers or increase my reach and getting out there for 2 reasons. One, yes, I have an ego, and yes, I would like to be able to do this more. And the more supporters I have, the better chance I'd be able to do more content. I mean, as it is now, I'm working 70, 80 hours a week. So it would be nice for my ego to reach more people. But I also think that I present things from an angle that I don't see a lot of other people approaching from all the time. So it would be nice, to get my voice out for those reasons. So, yeah, clearly there were selfish reasons to do this as well. But I am trying to make a commitment to reach out to more people, particularly on the left, regardless if they have a bigger platform than me or not, and regardless of their skill in debate or anything like that. Because I think it's important. I have so many people that disagree with me, that dislike Trump. I'm like, hey, man, come on the show. We'll do a conversation about it. And they're like, no, because you were a debater and you'll make me look bad. I don't think I'm that type of person. I think if you watch, if you could see me in real life or even some of the debates you could see, I really believe in the idea that everyone has some sort of value to bring, and you don't spike the ball on people. You're not just like, oh, you don't know anything about politics, so I'm just going to bring you on here and make you look bad. No, that's not what I'm about. There's tons of heroin where I live. It's a huge problem, which it'd be nice if we were dealing with that and trying to help with that problem instead of impeachment and all this other crap. But yeah, it's a bad deal. In fact, my sister-in-law is going to school for kind of helping out, getting a career in addiction studies and things like that. So I hope that this debate went well. I hope that people enjoyed it. If you know anyone, whether it be a prominent left-wing person on YouTube, a personal friend of yours, you yourself, that would like to have a discussion with me, please let me know. My email, I'll put it up again, but it's real simple. It's just rob.noor@gmail.com. go ahead and email me. I can't promise when I'll be able to actually do a debate with everyone. But I would love to participate. I am trying to reach out to more prominent leftists like David Pakman, people like Tim Pool, even people like Dave Rubin, Joe Rogan. I know the chances of me getting on a show like that is very small, but I tip my cap to Destiny. You know, he's got near 250,000 followers, and he let me on his show, so I thank him for that. And if I have any updates on him getting back in touch with me to possibly do a follow-up debate, I will definitely let everyone know. So thank you, everyone, so much. I have work in the morning, so I'm going to head out now, but I had a lot of fun doing this, and have a good one.